Imagine. You stand at the edge of a canyon. The wind moves through red cliffs like breath through a sleeping giant, low and ancient. It hums against your ears, a note older than memory. Below, carved into the face of the rock itself, lie the remnants of homes, hollow windows, stacked rooms, and ladders leading nowhere. They call this place Mesa Verde, the green table. But what you see isn't green. It's the color of sun-baked stone, of memory hardened into shape. The air tastes of dust, juniper, and time. You take a step closer to the edge. The drop swallows sound. Far below, where shadows pool like water, an echo rises, not quite a whisper, not quite a song. The sound of the past exhaling. The first time an archaeologist looked down into this canyon in the 1880s, he thought he'd discovered a city built by ghosts. The structures seemed impossible. Multi-story dwellings clinging to sheer cliff walls, hundreds of rooms tucked under vast stone overhangs. Who would build such homes? And why here, in the high desert where rivers run dry and summers blaze like open ovens? But this was no ghost city. It was once a living world, kitchens filled with smoke, laughter echoing against rock, children's feet patting over packed clay. The air then would have been full of corn pollen and the soft percussion of stone against stone as women ground maize into meal. If you listen long enough, you can almost hear it. The stones still remember. You can trace the story of the ancestral Puebloans, the people once called Anasazi, through these walls. Their fingerprints still press faintly into the clay mortar between blocks. These people didn't just live in the cliffs, they lived with them. Every ledge, every crevice was a choice of survival. Thousands of years before Europeans saw this continent, before even the Aztecs raised temples in the south, small families wandered this mesa plateau, hunters following deer through pinyon forests, gatherers plucking wild seeds from dry arroyos. Around 100 C, they began to settle, drawn by the promise of fertile soil along the canyon rims. They built pit houses, circular rooms dug into the earth and roofed with timber. These weren't primitive huts. They were early experiments in balance, in warmth, in belonging. The people learned to read the land the way we read a book, each grain of sand, each shadow telling them when to plant, when to move, when to pray. The desert, harsh and stingy, became a teacher. In the daylight, the mesas shimmered under the sun's glare. At night, the stars spilled over them like ash. Imagine sleeping there, in a pit house no wider than your living room, the fire's glow painting the faces of your family, the roof smelling of cedar smoke and wet clay. Outside, coyotes sang and the wind spoke through the grass. Time passed differently here. Centuries were marked not by kings or wars, but by harvests and droughts, by births and deaths recorded only in the rhythm of the land. Walk with me. Down the narrow trail, beneath the lip of the canyon. The descent is steep, carved by both human hands and rain. You can see the layers of stone, each band a page of the earth's memory, older than language. The air cools as you go, carrying the smell of damp rock and sage. Then, suddenly, you round a bend and the city reveals itself. Cliff Palace. Its towers rise directly from the canyon wall, pale sandstone shaped by patience. More than 150 rooms, 23 kivas, ladders, plazas. The scale is staggering, but it's the intimacy that stops you, the sense that this place was once full of breath and warmth. Potsherds still lie where they fell. Finger marks curve along the plaster like echoes of touch. You can almost see them, a woman bending over her grinding stone, hair tied back with yucca fiber, singing under her breath, a child darting between doorways, an elder carving prayer symbols into the wall, spirals, zigzags, patterns of rain and wind. There were astronomers, builders, farmers, and storytellers. They mapped the heavens in their architecture, aligning walls with solstices and equinoxes so that the sun itself could mark time. When light struck certain corners of the kiva floor, they knew the seasons had turned. To live here was to live inside the heartbeat of the world. The name Anasazi comes from a Navajo word often translated as ancient enemies. Or ancient ones. But today, their descendants, the Hopi, Zuni, Taos, Acoma, and other Pueblo peoples, prefer ancestral Puebloans. The older word carries a shadow of misunderstanding, a label given by outsiders who didn't yet know the depth of this people's story. The ancestral Puebloans were not lost tribes or vanished magicians. They were, and through their descendants still are, part of the living tapestry of the American Southwest. They built their lives on reciprocity. Every harvest, every hunt was offered first in gratitude to the spirits of the land. Cornmeal was sprinkled into the wind, songs were given to the sunrise, and stories were told at dusk to remind children that the world listens back. Because to them, stone was not silent. It was alive. When archaeologists uncovered prayer sticks sealed in the kivas, they found that many were painted with spirals and lightning bolts, symbols of connection. The people believed that the spirits of their ancestors dwelled in the earth below and the sky above, and the kiva was the bridge between them. Fire was the breath of that connection, the living flame through which the old ones still spoke. Look around again. Notice how the cliffs themselves seem to lean forward, as though eavesdropping. The rock's curvature was no accident. The ancestral Puebloans chose these alcoves carefully, not only for protection but for sound. Their voices could travel across the canyon, songs bouncing from wall to wall, carrying messages between dwellings. Imagine that, calling to your neighbors across the air, your words stitched into the wind. And at night, when the fires dimmed, the canyon would glow faintly with embers, hundreds of little stars mirrored on the rock. Travelers said it looked like the Milky Way had bent down to rest inside the earth. There's a kind of magic in that symmetry, sky above, sky below, as though the people were suspended between two infinities. But their world was not all harmony and peace. The desert demanded vigilance. Water was scarce. Droughts could stretch across decades. Archaeological layers reveal alternating bands of prosperity and hardship, rich harvests followed by cracked earth and empty granaries. Yet somehow they endured. They learned to catch rain in stone basins, to guide runoff through channels carved by hand. They built check dams to slow erosion, terraced their fields, and planted corn, beans, and squash, the three sisters, together, each one protecting and feeding the other. Even in the driest seasons, they found ways to keep the soil alive. And through it all, they told stories, stories that taught endurance. The Hopis still speak of Sipapu, the sacred place of emergence. They say their ancestors climbed up from the underworld into this world through a small hole in the earth, guided by spirits and light. That story lives here, in every kiva's floor, each one built with a tiny hole at its center to honor that passage. So every fire that burned in those chambers was a reminder of where humanity came from, and perhaps, where it might return. You stand now in the heart of Cliff Palace, where sunlight spills in thin, gold slants through the alcove's mouth. Your hand brushes the wall. The stone is cool, faintly rough. Somewhere beneath your palm lies centuries of dust, the ashes of meals, the remains of fires, the breath of lives. Close your eyes. You can hear the wind carrying fragments of an old language, Tewa, Karasan, Hopi, words not dead but waiting. You can almost make out their cadence, rhythmic, rising and falling like water against stone. It's easy to think of ruins as still, but they're not. They move, slowly. Each year, the rock expands and contracts with heat and cold, exhaling sand like memory escaping a lung. The dwellings themselves are alive in geological time, shifting, whispering, eroding, remembering. And in that subtle movement lies the truth. These places were never abandoned. They simply changed their shape. Step back into the light of the mesa. The horizon stretches endlessly, red, gold, and the pale blue of distance. Ravens circle high above, their calls echoing off the cliffs. You can smell rain somewhere far away, the metallic promise of a storm. You wonder how many generations watched the same sky, prayed for those same clouds to break. The ancestral Puebloans didn't see themselves as masters of nature. They were participants in its cycles, children of sun and stone. When they built with humility, aligning homes to catch the morning light, to face east where the new day is born. Every wall was a conversation with the sun. And now, as the day fades and shadows climb the cliffs, you begin to sense what they must have known, that the land doesn't belong to us. We belong to it. The path winds upward again, out of shadow and into sunlight. The stone underfoot warms with each step, and the canyon floor falls away behind you until it becomes a silent ripple of gold and green far below. You feel the air thin as you climb back to the mesa top. From up here, the whole land seems to breathe. Mesas rising like waves of ancient time, the horizon drawn with the faint shimmer of heat. This, once, was their kingdom. Not a kingdom of crowns or conquest, but of patience. They were called Anasazi. The word still lingers in books, on museum plaques, in the mouths of guides and travelers. It's a word the Navajo used, Anasazi. The ancient enemies, or the ancient ones. A name born not of insult, but of distance, a reminder that even the past, when seen from afar, can look strange and shadowed. Today we call them the ancestral Puebloans, because they were not a vanished people, only ancestors whose songs continue in the pueblos of the southwest. Hopi, Zuni, Taos, Acoma, Laguna. Listen closely, and you'll hear the same rhythms in their prayers, the same patterns painted on pottery, the same belief that the earth itself is alive and listening. The name changed, but the story never ended. The ancestral Puebloans did not arrive in this world all at once. Their story begins deep in the weave of prehistory, when hunter-gatherers roamed these high plateaus more than 2,000 years before the first cliff palace was built. They were wanderers at first, following rivers, seeking seeds and game, living lightly on the land. But slowly, something began to shift. They discovered corn. The tiny, fragile ancestor of modern maize came north from Mexico, carried perhaps by traders, perhaps by wanderers who spoke to spirits as they walked. It changed everything. Corn could be stored, divided, shared, measured against the seasons. With corn came roots, not the kind that dig into soil, but the kind that bind people to place. Imagine them, these first farmers of the Southwest, hands stained red from the soil, eyes squinting at the sun as they pressed seeds into furrows no deeper than a finger's length. They built small dwellings near their fields, shallow pit houses, half buried in the ground to keep cool in summer, warm in winter. Roofs of juniper and willow covered the openings. Smoke rose through small vents into the morning air. Life became a rhythm, planting, tending, harvesting, storytelling. Every act was sacred, every season a lesson. When drought came, they learned to listen harder, to read the flight of birds, the taste of the wind, the way light fell on stone. Their knowledge was not written in books but etched into memory, passed through generations in songs and stories that mapped the land like invisible trails. You pause at the top of the mesa. The view stretches endless, red canyons and gray-green scrub rolling toward a distant horizon where sky and stone meet like two halves of the same breath. To the ancestral Puebloans, this was not empty space. Every rock, every shadow held meaning. The mesas were spirits, the canyons lungs through which the world breathed. They called themselves Daini, Hizatsunim, Ashiwi. The people, the ancient ones, those who belong. To be human here was to be part of a greater pattern: rain, corn, fire, and stone. Their gods were not distant figures in clouds, but forces you could feel: the warmth of the sun, the sound of running water, the heartbeat of drums echoing against the cliffs. They told stories of creation that began not in the sky but underground. The first world, they said, was a place of darkness and mist, where the first beings lived like seeds in the womb of the earth. One day, guided by sacred insects and spirits of light, they climbed upward through a hole, the Sipapu, and emerged into this world. The kiva, that circular underground chamber found in every pueblo, still carries that memory. Each fire lit within its walls was a small sun, a reminder of that first dawn. So when they built homes, they built them as extensions of the earth itself. The walls were not barriers but continuations of the cliffs. The doorways faced east, always east, to greet the sun. And between these dwellings ran invisible threads of meaning, sacred lines connecting families, fields, and the unseen world of ancestors. Archaeologists once marveled at the precision of their architecture. Without metal, without wheels, without beasts of burden, they built structures that have endured for centuries. But it wasn't brute strength that raised these stone cities, it was harmony. They learned the grain of the rock, the weight of sand, the balance of shade and light. Every block of sandstone was shaped with hammerstones and patience, fitted so neatly that time itself has trouble prying them apart. The walls were plastered with clay mixed with straw, smoothed by hand. Each touch left a fingerprint, small, oval impressions that still catch the light when the sun is low. You can trace those prints today and feel the ghosts of their makers. They built not for monuments, but for continuity. Their homes were meant to last through generations, to hold not just families, but stories. Within these walls, mothers taught daughters to weave, fathers taught sons to carve. Children learned to read the sky. They watched the stars, noting where the sun rose at solstice and where shadows fell at equinox. They built small shrines along the mesa edges to mark the movement of the heavens. Science and spirituality were never separate for them. Measuring time was a form of prayer. And the people themselves, what would they have looked like, moved like, sounded like? Their hair, dark and thick, braided or tied back with yucca fiber. Skin the color of sun-baked clay, eyes deep and steady as canyon pools. They wore sandals woven from plant fibers, robes of cotton they grew and spun themselves. When they spoke, their words rose and fell in tones that mimicked the rhythm of wind and water, a language built from the landscape. Their laughter, too, would have carried far, ringing against the cliffs like birdsong. They lived communally, bound by kinship and cooperation. No one survived alone in this place. Food, water, and labor were shared. Disputes were settled through council, not war. To harm another was to harm yourself, for all life flowed from the same source. Trade routes stretched for hundreds of miles, connecting them to distant peoples. Turquoise from the south, seashells from the Pacific, feathers from tropical birds, even copper bells from Mexico. These items were not mere curiosities but symbols of connection, proof that even in this harsh desert, they were part of a vast, living network. Imagine standing in a plaza during one of their gatherings, dancers circling in time with drums, the air thick with dust and song. You'd smell roasted corn, hear the deep hum of voices rising in harmony. Every movement had purpose, every beat of the drum echoed the pulse of the world. Yet for all their skill and serenity, life here was never easy. The land was generous only to those who understood its moods. Summer sun could burn crops to dust. Winter nights could freeze the very water in your skin. A bad year meant hunger. A worse one meant migration. So the ancestral Puebloans learned adaptability. To move when the land demanded it, to shift from mesa to canyon, from one river valley to the next. Archaeological layers tell this story in silence. Traces of homes abandoned and rebuilt, pottery styles changing like dialects, evidence of droughts that forced families to seek new horizons. But wherever they went, they carried their world with them, not in possessions, but in knowledge. They knew how to find water in stone. They knew how to listen to birds to locate rain. They knew that life was a balance between giving and taking, and that survival was not conquest, but harmony. The Spanish would not arrive for centuries. Columbus was still an unborn rumor when the people of Mesa Verde were already old, their culture refined by 1,000 years of trial and triumph. To think of them as lost is to misunderstand time itself. Their disappearance from these cliffs around 1300 AD was not a vanishing act, it was an evolution. Drought, resource strain, shifting alliances, Yes, these things played a part. But the people didn't fade into dust. They moved south and east, to the valleys of the Rio Grande, to the Pueblos that still stand today. If you visit Acoma or Zuni or Hopi now, you can hear the echoes of Mesa Verde in every word, every prayer, every pot fired in earth and ash. The people never left. Only the wind stayed behind to guard the stones. The sun leans westward now. The mesas glow with the color of embers, the air sharp with evening coolness. Somewhere a raven calls, its cry bouncing between cliffs like a memory that refuses to die. The trail bends once more, and the light shifts, that peculiar desert glow when day begins its slow surrender to evening. The horizon melts into color, rose, copper, and the pale lavender of distant storms. A hawk wheels overhead, its shadow sliding across the rock face like a memory of flight. The land spreads out before you, vast, reverent, unspeaking. Mesas rise from the earth like the backs of sleeping beasts, their flat tops crowned with pinyon and juniper. Between them, canyons slice deep, exposing the bones of time itself. Here the world is built from silence and patience. The kind of silence that hums, that holds 1,000 unspoken stories just beneath the surface. This is Mesa Verde, the green table. A land balanced between sky and stone, where people once lived closer to the clouds than to the ground. To the ancestral Puebloans, it was more than geography. It was a living being, an ancestor, a teacher, a spirit with moods and voices all its own. The first thing you notice is the light. It's unlike anywhere else, sharp, almost physical, painting edges so clear they feel cut from glass. In the morning, it burns white gold. By midday, it turns harsh and relentless. And in the evening, it softens into something that feels like forgiveness. Every surface, cliff, tree, shard of pottery, catches the sun and returns it as though paying tribute. You pause near the cliff's edge and look out. The wind here never stops. It's the same wind that once rattled corn leaves and fluttered prayer feathers hung from wooden poles. It carries scents of sagebrush, of rain that might or might not come, of earth baked clean by centuries. This is a land that demands attention. And for those who once called it home, it demanded devotion. To understand why the ancestral Puebloans built their cities in these cliffs, you have to see the world as they did, vertically, not horizontally. Below the cliffs, danger, snakes, flash floods, raiding bands, the dry mouth of the desert waiting to swallow crops. Above, the mesa top, vast, exposed, but full of promise. Between those worlds, they found the middle place, the stone alcoves carved by time itself, cool in summer, shielded in winter, reachable only by those who knew the paths. It was as if the earth had opened her arms to hold them. The cliffs themselves were formed millions of years ago, when rivers carved their way through uplifted plains. Over time, erosion sculpted alcoves so perfect in curvature and orientation that they seemed designed for human life. The ancestral Puebloans recognized this harmony. They did not impose upon it, they aligned with it. They built where the stone faced south or southeast, where the sun could warm their homes in winter and hide them in shade through the summer. They watched the play of light for years before choosing where to build, how each solstice shifted shadows, how wind flowed, how rain traced down the walls. And so they raised their cities in the cliffs not as an act of defiance against nature, but as a gesture of trust. The climb to those dwellings was no small task. Imagine scaling narrow footpaths chipped into stone, each step carved by hands that believed deeply in their place in this world. Ladders made of juniper poles lashed with yucca fiber led up and down, some spanning 30, 40 feet. A misstep could mean death. Yet for the people who lived here, it was daily life. Children learned to climb before they could run. Elders traversed those paths with the calm of habit. The stone beneath their feet wasn't merely ground, it was memory, worn smooth by generations of bare sols. From above, their cities looked like swallows' nests, tucked into the earth's ribs, clinging yet harmonious. From within, they were labyrinths of light and shadow, each doorway leading to another small world, storage rooms cool as cellars, courtyards open to the stars, passageways narrow enough for one person to slip through sideways. You can still feel the heat radiating from the walls even after sunset, the stones storing the day's warmth and giving it back, as if unwilling to let go. The rhythm of life here was marked by light and stone. At dawn, the first rays spilled across the canyon, touching the plastered walls of the dwellings and waking the people within. Smoke rose from small fires. The air filled with the low hum of morning rituals, grinding corn, calling to children, feeding dogs and turkeys, whispering prayers to the east. Everything they did followed the sun's arc. It wasn't worship in the way later religions would define it. It was acknowledgement, a partnership. The sun gave life, and they gave gratitude. To live at Mesa Verde was to exist in conversation with the elements. You woke to the wind, worked with the earth, drank from rain, and slept under stars so sharp they could pierce the soul. There was no boundary between sacred and ordinary. The sacred was simply the way of things. When the people spoke of their land, they didn't say, "This is where we live." They said, "This is who we are." Even now, centuries later, the land still remembers. If you walk quietly through the ruins, you can sense the ghosts of those rhythms. The sunlight moves across the kiva floors exactly as it did 1,000 years ago. The smell of juniper smoke lingers in the cracks of the stone. Ravens perch on the same ledges where children once laughed. Archaeologists uncover fragments, corn cobs preserved in ash, sandals woven from yucca, bits of painted pottery with spirals that echoed the paths of wind. Each fragment is a voice. Not shouting, not pleading, just speaking softly, like someone telling you a secret they've guarded for a long, long time. The designs on their pottery were more than decoration. Spirals for wind, step triangles for mountains, parallel lines for rain. To hold a pot was to hold a story, to trace the geometry of belief. The clay itself came from nearby riverbanks, kneaded with water carried in jars over miles of rugged terrain. Every piece bore the mark of its maker, not as signature, but as connection. These weren't objects. They were prayers made tangible. And the canyons, the canyons were their cathedrals. When you stand at the rim and call out, your voice doesn't vanish. It comes back, softened, reshaped. The ancestral Puebloans must have known this intimately. They built where sound carried. A mother could call from one alcove and hear her child answer from another across the gulf. Songs could cross entire valleys, braided with the wind. In that echo lies a truth older than any ruin. Sound never truly dies here. It just becomes part of the landscape. Perhaps that's why the ancients spoke so often of spirits in the wind, because they could hear them. And maybe, standing here now, you can too. The desert has its own way of teaching humility. One season, it grants abundance, rain that pools in stone basins, corn that grows tall and green. The next, it withholds everything. Crops wither, rivers vanish into cracked earth, and the air turns thin and bitter. The ancestral Puebloans understood this balance. They built granaries high in the cliffs to store surplus grain, sealed with stone and clay, safe from pests and thieves. Their survival was an act of foresight and faith. Each kernel of corn, each pot of water represented not just sustenance, but hope for the next generation. Even in scarcity, they found ways to create beauty. They painted walls with white clay and charcoal designs, symbols of balance, sun and shadow, sky and earth, male and female, life and death. The dualities weren't contradictions, they were harmony expressed through opposites. To live here was to understand that nothing existed alone. As the sun sinks lower, the mesas blush red, then purple, then a deep, solemn blue. The cliffs seem to breathe. You feel a strange vertigo, as if time itself is shifting beneath your feet, the centuries folding like pages. It's easy to romanticize this place, to imagine a golden age of harmony untouched by hardship. But the truth is more human. There were tensions here, between families, between communities, between the need to stay and the need to leave. Archaeologists have found traces of fortifications, evidence of defense. Some dwellings bear burn marks. The droughts of the 1200s were long and cruel. Famine breeds desperation, and even a peaceful people can be driven to conflict by hunger. Yet even in struggle, their artistry endured. Their walls held, their stories survived. The spirit of cooperation never entirely broke. Because at their core, they believed what the Hopis still say today: the earth is our mother, we are her children. And children may quarrel, but they never stop belonging. The wind shifts again. You catch the faint scent of rain, petrichor mingled with sage. Far across the canyon, lightning flickers, silent and slow. For a heartbeat, the cliffs glow silver, their edges shining like veins of light in stone. You can almost imagine the ancient people watching the same storm, standing at this same precipice. Maybe they saw in the lightning a message from the gods, not anger, but reminder. That power lives not in possession, but in reverence. That the sky and the stone are not opposites, but halves of a whole. They built their lives in the meeting place between the two, not above the earth, not beneath it, but within it. And now, standing where they once stood, you begin to understand. The ancestral Puebloans were not a people who conquered their world, they harmonized with it. The cliffs were their walls, the sky their ceiling, the earth their floor. Every sunrise was a ceremony. Every night a prayer. The rain finally reaches you, a brief, trembling curtain that cools the air and darkens the stone. Drops spatter the path, leaving patterns like tiny constellations. You tilt your face upward, eyes closed. The first touch of rain on desert skin feels like grace. When you open your eyes again, the last of the sun slips away, and the stars arrive, sudden, countless, sharp as flint. The Milky Way stretches overhead like a river of white fire. For the ancestral Puebloans, this was the path of souls, the road the spirits walked after death. They believed their ancestors lived among those stars, watching, guiding. Every ceremony, every dance, was a way of keeping that connection alive, ensuring that the people remained part of both earth and sky. Tonight, under the same river of light, the connection feels unbroken. The night deepens, cool and immense, and for a while, you simply stand in it, listening. The storm has passed. Water drips from ledges high above, each drop echoing against stone like a heartbeat inside the canyon. Somewhere, far away, an owl calls once and then falls silent. The air is sharp with the scent of rain-soaked sage and earth newly awakened. And as the darkness breathes, you feel something ancient stirring beneath your feet. Not a sound, not a tremor, but a pulse faint and steady. The memory of beginnings. Because long before these cliffs were carved into homes, long before the towers and kivas and sacred fires, this land was already alive with the first signs of human permanence. This is where their dawn began. Imagine it, nearly 2,000 years ago, the mesa tops were quieter than they are tonight. No voices, no stone cities, only wind and the scratch of small feet over dry soil. Families moved through these valleys like shadows, hunters, gatherers, wanderers. Their lives were still braided with the wild. They followed the deer, the rabbit, the flowering of cactus, the ripening of seed pods. They carried with them nothing they couldn't hold in their hands: woven baskets, stone knives, the memory of water. But something was changing. Something slow and invisible, the first pull toward belonging. They began to linger near the fertile patches where wild corn grew, a foreign plant that had drifted north from faraway valleys in what is now Mexico. Those small, stubborn stalks offered something revolutionary: predictability. If the rains came and the seeds were tended, food could be coaxed from the ground instead of hunted from it. And with food came roots, the first whisper of home. So they dug shallow depressions in the earth, half houses, half caves, known now as pit houses. If you could walk among them, you'd see humble circles scooped into the soil, their roofs made from timber and mud, their walls cool and smelling faintly of smoke. Each one was a microcosm, a small universe where life began to settle. Inside, fires crackled in stone-lined pits. The air was thick with the scent of roasted corn, of sage, of wet clay drying. Above the flames, pottery vessels blackened with soot, crude at first, then more elegant, painted with thin black lines that spiraled and danced. Outside, dogs barked softly. Children played in the dust. At night, families huddled together under firs, listening to coyotes sing and to the low, endless murmur of the wind. These early settlers probably didn't think of themselves as founders of a civilization. They were simply learning how to survive, yet, unknowingly, they were also shaping a philosophy that the earth, if respected, will give. That stone, if listened to, will shelter. Time in the desert doesn't move in leaps, it spirals. Centuries passed in slow, deliberate turns. The people grew more skilled, their communities larger. The scattered pit houses began to cluster, families banding together for strength, for ceremony, for love. They planted corn and beans, crafted new tools from stone and bone, learned to store seeds for the lean seasons. And through that cooperation, something remarkable emerged: culture. In the evenings, the villagers would gather around central fires. Sparks rose into the night, mingling with stars. Elders told stories: how the world had been birthed from darkness, how the people had climbed through a hole in the earth into the light, how balance must be kept between all things. Every tale was more than entertainment. It was instruction, ethics disguised as myth. Don't take more than you need. Honor the water. Remember where you came from. Over time, these teachings became the backbone of their world. And as they passed them from generation to generation, their hands also grew more confident in shaping the clay of their lives. The first above-ground structures appeared, simple rows of interconnected rooms, made of stone and mud. Sunlight fell across doorways like blessings. Women wove yucca fiber into sandals and baskets so tight they could hold water. Men carved tools with edges as sharp as thought. Life had rhythm now. At dawn, the women ground corn on smooth metates, the sound echoing across the mesa, stone on stone, a heartbeat that never stopped. At midday, the men walked the fields, checking for signs of rain. And at night, as the desert cooled, songs rose from the hearths, low, melodic, full of gratitude. If you close your eyes, you can almost hear it still, the steady pulse of human hands turning wilderness into home. Archaeologists call this period the basket maker era, a name that captures their ingenuity, though not their soul. To weave a basket in this dry land was no small act. It was both art and survival, a way to transform the fragility of desert grass into something enduring. Each fiber was chosen, stripped, soaked, and bound with care. The baskets were light yet strong enough to carry the future. Their makers were the ancestors of the builders of Mesa Verde. And within a few hundred years, those baskets would give way to pottery, those pit houses to stone villages, and those stories whispered by firelight to ceremonies that echoed through kivas deep beneath the earth. But in these early centuries, life remained intimate. The people's world stretched only as far as their feet could carry them, their gods no larger than the mountains that framed their horizon. The land was their scripture, and the seasons their scripture's verses. You walk now across one of those early village sites, a place invisible to most eyes, its remnants buried just beneath the crust of soil. Kneel, and you might find a flake of obsidian, a fragment of painted pottery, a few charred kernels of corn. The rain has washed the rest away, scattering it like dust across the ages. But close your eyes and listen, and the past begins to breathe again. You can hear the soft rhythmic thud of someone grinding grain, the laughter of a child chasing a lizard across the sand, the murmur of voices as neighbors trade food or stories. Life, here, was not silent. It was simply modest, lived within the heartbeat of the land. There was no wealth in the sense we know it, no hierarchy carved into stone. Leadership came through wisdom, through the ability to read the sky and remember the old songs. Their economy was reciprocity. What one gave today might return a season later, transformed by another's hands. This, perhaps, was their greatest genius, not architecture or agriculture, but balance. A civilization that understood enough was better than excess, that comfort was not abundance, and that harmony was the truest form of power. Yet, even balance must evolve. By 700 AD, the villages grew more complex. The people began to build great houses with multiple rooms and courtyards, the first blueprints of what would one day become the cliff dwellings. They arranged their communities around circular ceremonial chambers, early kivas, whose designs mirrored the cosmos, round as the sun, open to the sky, descended by ladder through a hole symbolic of the sipapu, the portal from the underworld. Within these spaces, firelight flickered against plastered walls. The people sang to the spirits, to the ancestors, to the unseen forces of rain and fertility. Their songs rose through the smoke hole like prayers carried on wind. These ceremonies weren't superstition, they were science of the soul, maintaining equilibrium between humans and the vast mystery of existence. And beyond the rituals, they created art, murals painted in mineral reds and ochres, pottery with black on white designs so precise they seemed to hum with mathematics. Each brushstroke was both decoration and devotion. You begin to sense, as you walk through this imagined dawn, that these people were never primitive. They were poets of necessity, philosophers of stone and soil. They understood cycles better than we ever will, rain and drought, life and death, light and dark. Nothing wasted, nothing forgotten. When someone died, they were buried beneath the floors of their homes, not as ghosts, but as guardians. Life and death shared the same space, as natural and inseparable as day and night. Children played above their ancestors' bones, not in fear but in continuity. And when a house grew old or a family moved, it wasn't abandoned. It was allowed to return to the earth, its stones slowly collapsing back into the dust that had once birthed them. To live, to die, to rebuild, it was all one motion. The people of the dawn watched the sky more carefully than any astronomer. They marked the solstices with stones placed deliberately on ridges, their shadows falling in precise alignment on certain days of the year. The heavens were a calendar, and the stars, the eyes of the ancestors. In winter, when snow dusted the mesa tops, the nights were long and stories grew richer. Around the hearth, they spoke of the hero twins who chased monsters from the earth, of Spider Grandmother who wove the first web of creation, of the sacred balance that held the universe together like the warp and weft of a loom. Every myth was an equation, explaining not just how the world began, but how it should continue. And so, across centuries, their dawn brightened. From scattered households grew thriving villages, from simple rituals, elaborate ceremonies. Stone replaced mud, plazas replaced open ground, and the first hints of community planning emerged, walls aligned with cardinal directions, rooms arranged to catch both light and shadow. It was no longer survival. It was civilization. The earth, once something to endure, had become something to collaborate with. And in that collaboration, art and science were born together. As you walk the mesa now, centuries later, the wind still carries the faintest residue of that first fire, the warmth of beginnings. The land seems to remember every hand that shaped it, every voice that sang gratitude into the dark. When dawn breaks again, a real dawn, now, it feels less like morning and more like memory returning to the light. The cliffs glow pink, the air trembles with the hush before the day begins. You follow it down the trail, descending toward a new world, not the world of pit houses and humble fields anymore, but the world of the cliffs. This is where the people came when the land above began to change, when droughts lingered, when the rains grew stingy, when protection from sun and storm became a matter of survival. They looked to the cliffs and saw not peril, but possibility. They saw the same stone that had sheltered their ancestors' spirits, and asked it to shelter their living. So, with patience and fire and stone, they carved homes from the canyon walls themselves. From a distance, the dwellings appear like nests of swallows, tucked beneath the overhanging cliffs, impossible, precarious, beautiful. But as you draw closer, the scale takes your breath away. The largest, Cliff Palace, stretches nearly 200 feet across and contains over 150 rooms. Next to it, smaller communities cling to alcoves in the stone, each one unique, each one a constellation of rooms, towers, and kivas linked by ladders and narrow passageways. To climb into one of these dwellings is to step directly into another rhythm of time. The air is cool here, even in the heat of summer. The stone above you curves like a natural roof, the ceiling of a cathedral carved not by human hands but by water and wind. The rooms are small, intimate, built from sandstone blocks so carefully shaped that even now, centuries later, the walls still stand firm. Each brick carries the echo of a hand. Each doorway still holds the memory of someone passing through, a mother carrying a child, a boy bringing water, an old man stooping beneath the lintel one last time. Inside, the walls were once plastered smooth and painted, red and white patterns that caught the firelight. Some faint traces still remain, like the residue of dreams. Imagine living here, high above the canyon floor, where every morning begins with a climb and every evening ends with the world spread out below you like an ocean of stone. At dawn, smoke rises from dozens of hearths, curling through doorways and drifting up into the open air. The sound of grinding stones fills the alcove, women on their knees, pressing corn against metates with rhythmic strength, the dust of maize clinging to their skin like gold powder. Children play nearby, their laughter darting between the walls like swallows in flight. Their toys are simple, little carved animals, pebbles, sticks. They chase one another through the narrow passages, their voices echoing down the cliffs. Men climb down the ladders with baskets slung over their backs, heading toward the fields on the mesa tops. There, among the dry ridges, they tend their corn, beans, and squash, whispering small prayers to the sky with each handful of soil. From up here, the whole world is visible, the canyons below, the endless plateau beyond, the slow drift of clouds. And yet life remains deeply rooted, contained within the heartbeat of this alcove. The cliff dwellings were not isolated castles. They were vibrant, breathing communities. Families lived in clusters of rooms around shared courtyards. Neighbors exchanged food, stories, laughter. At night, they gathered in the plazas to talk, to sing, to watch the moonlight slide across the canyon walls. Their days were full, their world complete. Inside the rooms, life was both simple and ingenious. Each dwelling had a hearth built into the floor, blackened by countless fires. Near it, small openings in the walls allowed smoke to escape, though the air was always tinged with the scent of wood and clay. Niches carved into the plaster held small treasures, feathers, beads, shells traded from faraway coasts. The floors were swept clean with bundles of sagebrush. Food storage was a sacred task. Corn was their lifeblood, and its care was a ceremony in itself. Families built sealed granaries, small, tight rooms plastered to keep out moisture, where precious grain was stored through the lean seasons. A single handful of corn meant the difference between life and hunger. And then there were the kivas, the heart of every community. Circular, subterranean, built with precision and reverence. You descend into one by ladder, your hands sliding down the smooth rungs polished by centuries of use. The air inside is cool, almost holy. A fire pit lies at the center, its flame once tended through long nights of ceremony. Around the walls run low stone benches. In the floor, a small hole, the sipapu, marks the passage from the underworld, a symbol of emergence and memory. To sit in a kiva is to feel time fold inward. The whisper of wind above becomes the breath of ancestors. The flicker of firelight feels alive, aware. Here, the people spoke with spirits, planned their planting and harvests, recited stories that stretched back into myth. It was both temple and council chamber, both cosmos and hearth. Daily life in the cliffs demanded balance, between hardship and wonder, labor and reverence. The mesa might look serene now, but imagine the sounds that once filled it: the steady rhythm of stone tools against rock, the slap of clay as walls were repaired, the rustle of sandals made from yucca fiber, the bark of dogs that guarded the homes. Water was gathered drop by drop from springs, carried in jars balanced carefully against the body. Firewood had to be hauled from the mesa top, heavy bundles lashed to the back, the climb steep and unrelenting. Every task required effort, every comfort earned through endurance. And yet, the people did not see this as suffering. It was simply the way of the world, the dance between giving and receiving. Their dwellings were designed with elegance and purpose. Small windows faced the rising sun to warm the rooms at dawn, while thick walls kept them cool at midday. Doorways were low to conserve heat. Plazas were arranged to capture breezes. Every inch of their architecture was tuned to the rhythm of nature. You can feel it even now, the quiet intelligence of their design, the humility in their craftsmanship. As you move deeper into the ruin, the sunlight narrows to thin strips, falling through openings like ribbons of gold. Dust motes float in the beams, shimmering like tiny spirits suspended in air. You can almost hear voices, faint, overlapping, alive. A woman teaching her daughter how to weave, her fingers moving swiftly across the loom. An old man grinding pigments to paint a pot with the spiral of the wind. A child being scolded for dropping a water jar and laughing anyway. Every detail here carries a story. The wear on the stone steps from countless bare feet. The fingerprints pressed into the mortar. The soot stains on the ceilings where generations of fires breathed their last smoke. It's easy to forget that these ruins were once full of warmth, color, laughter, the smell of cooking corn. Archaeologists call them dwellings. But they were homes. Night in the cliffs was another world entirely. When the fires dimmed, the alcoves felt quiet except for the sighing of wind and the soft cooing of doves in their nests. The stars spilled across the sky like rivers of crushed quartz, and the moonlight poured down into the canyon until even the shadows seemed to glow. Families gathered close inside their rooms. Stories were told in whispers, tales of the hero twins, of how the first people emerged into the world, of how corn came to be, of how the spirits watched from the mountains. Sometimes the men would climb to the mesa top to watch the stars, using their slow movement to mark the seasons. The Pleiades rising meant it was time to prepare for winter. Orion's belt warned of the colder moons ahead. They knew the sky as we know our own reflections. And in that knowing, they found both comfort and guidance. The world for them was not divided between heaven and earth. It was one great living field, stone as sacred as sky, human breath as precious as rain. By day, the cliffs were alive with activity. By night, they became instruments of listening. The wind would travel through the dwellings, whispering through cracks, carrying the sounds of insects and distant thunder. Sometimes, when you stand there now, the same wind brushes your ear, and for a moment, it's hard to tell whether it's only the breeze or the faint, lingering murmur of those who once called this place home. Their world was small in size, yet infinite in spirit. Every stone they laid, every cornfield they planted, every story they told was part of a continuous thread connecting them to the first dawn, and to every dawn yet to come. And so, the people thrived. For generations, they lived within the cliffs, mastering a way of existence that balanced on the edge between endurance and grace. They raised children, buried elders, traded with distant villages, and watched the sun cross the sky 1,000 times over. Their lives were woven seamlessly into the landscape, until one could no longer tell where human effort ended and nature began. To them, the cliffs were not stone walls. They were the body of the world. To live within them was to live inside creation itself. And if you listen, truly listen, you can still hear their presence, the rustle of corn stalks in the wind, the soft patter of bare feet on stone, the echo of laughter that refuses to fade. The people of the cliffs are gone, but the life they built remains suspended here, eternal, breathing softly between the canyon's walls. The sun slips behind the western ridge, and for a long moment the cliffs glow with that last impossible light, the deep amber that makes stone look alive. You stand on the ledge, watching shadows gather in the alcoves below, and it feels as though the canyon itself is inhaling. It's here, in this breath between day and night, that you begin to understand their genius. These dwellings carved into the bones of the earth, these perfect, enduring sanctuaries, were not built with iron, or wheels, or beasts of burden. Only hands, only will, only the quiet precision of a people who knew how to listen to stone. Look closely at the walls. Each block of sandstone has been shaped with nothing more than a hammerstone and another piece of rock, each edge rubbed until it fitted neatly against the next. No mortar of lime or cement, only clay and ash mixed with water, the same mixture they used to plaster their floors, to seal their hearts against the wind. When you lean near the surface, you can still see the small imprints of fingers pressed into the wet mortar. Hundreds of them, faint as whispers, but there. Not decoration, not accident. Just the quiet marks of builders who worked with patience rather than haste, whose architecture was an act of devotion. Their tools were simple, yet perfect for the task. A maul of hard dolomite for shaping blocks, a chisel of deer antler, a hammerstone small enough to rest in the palm. They had no metal blades to cut wood, no iron nails to fasten beams. Everything was tied, balanced, persuaded into place by understanding rather than force. The beams that still hold the ceilings aloft are juniper and pine, trees carried from the mesa top, stripped of bark, and dragged down by hand along narrow trails that would terrify even the sure-footed today. Each timber was a conversation between body and gravity. Imagine them, men and women hauling trunks along cliff edges, feet braced against the void, songs rising to steady their rhythm. And yet, somehow, nothing feels hurried. The work was slow, cyclical, season by season. They didn't build against time, they built within it. The architecture of the ancestral Puebloans is not just engineering, it's poetry translated into stone. Everything in these structures carries meaning, from the way the walls align with the solstice sun to the way the air moves through the rooms. Step inside one of their towers and you can feel the flow of wind, guided by narrow vents that pull fresh air through the living spaces and carry smoke away. Light enters in deliberate shafts, marking the hours. Some rooms are warm as breath, others stay cool even when the world above bakes under the noon sun. These weren't coincidences. They were calculations, the mathematics of survival performed not on parchment, but on landscape. To stand in one of these rooms is to feel harmony at work, the thickness of the walls buffering heat, the curve of the alcove redirecting wind, the orientation of each doorway balancing light and shadow. It is architecture that doesn't dominate nature but negotiates with it. Even the cliff itself was a partner in design. The overhangs shielded the homes from rain and snow, while the stone behind them absorbed heat through the day and released it at night. In winter, warmth; in summer, shade. A perfect equilibrium, found not through machines but through observation, through patience. The builders of these places were both engineers and mystics. Their blueprints were drawn in the sky. Each kiva, each plaza, each tower aligns with celestial points, the rise of Venus, the path of the solstice sun, the shadow cast by the cliff at equinox. These alignments were not ornament. They were calendar and compass, myth and mathematics interwoven. When the morning sun struck the precise notch of a wall, the people knew it was time to plant. When the shadow fell differently, it was time to harvest. The very architecture became an instrument for marking the pulse of the universe. And so, their buildings were more than shelter. They were prayers made visible, places where the human hand met the rhythm of the cosmos. If you could have watched them building, you'd see the process as almost ritual. First came the gathering of stone. The people would search the talus slopes below the cliffs, finding pieces already fractured by nature, not quarried, not forced, but selected. They carried them up by hand, one at a time, passing them along in chains of bodies and laughter. Then came the shaping. Each block was ground smooth against another stone, the sound echoing softly through the canyon, a dry rasp, like breath drawn through sand. The laying of walls was deliberate, measured. They built in courses, rows of stones rising steadily until a room took shape. The clay mortar was mixed with straw and water, its smell earthy and sharp. Children might have helped gather the clay, their small hands splattered red as they played near the mixing pits. When the walls reached shoulder height, roof beams were set across them, then smaller branches, then mats of brush, all sealed with more clay until the roof was solid. Some ceilings still bear the fingerprints of those who smoothed them, suspended mid-motion for 800 years. And at last, when the rooms were complete, they didn't just move in. They blessed them. Cornmeal was sprinkled in the corners, feathers tied to beams, a fire lit in the hearth to awaken the spirit of the space. These weren't mere buildings. They were beings, born from the earth and given breath by human hands. You move now through one of these ancient corridors. The light shifts as you pass through doorways, low openings forcing you to bow your head, to enter each room with respect. Your shadow stretches across walls that were last touched by their builders before Columbus was even a whisper in the world. The air smells faintly of dust, stone, and something sweet you can't name, the ghost of old fires, maybe. You run your fingers along the seams where stones meet, and you feel the calm precision in their arrangement. No panic, no waste. Just balance. It's humbling, isn't it? How they accomplished all this without what we call technology. No pulleys, no levers, no iron chisels, no written plans. Their architecture came from observation, intuition, and generations of apprenticeship. Children grew up watching their elders lay stone, repair walls, read the movement of sunlight. Knowledge was memory, passed not through books but through hands. And perhaps that's why these places endure. What's built by memory endures longer than what's built by design. At sunset, the cliffs catch fire. The walls, the towers, the doorways, they all glow as though lit from within. And for a moment, you can almost see the city alive again, smoke rising from hearths, figures moving in shadow, the murmur of voices carried by the wind. When you think of ancient civilizations, it's easy to imagine grandeur, pyramids, empires, monuments to power. But here, grandeur lies in restraint. The ancestral Puebloans built not upward but inward. Their structures aren't meant to impress the sky but to belong to it. Each dwelling is scaled to the human body, to the family, to the community. The doorways are small not out of poverty, but out of respect for warmth and efficiency. Their towers, slender and circular, seem to converse with the canyon wind rather than defy it. They built what was necessary and nothing more, and in that, they achieved a kind of elegance that our modern cities have long forgotten. Imagine the sound of it, the construction alive with rhythm. The strike of hammerstone against sandstone. The murmur of voices calling across the ledges. The shuffling of feet on ladders, the rustle of woven rope. No overseers. No slaves. Only a shared purpose, a shared survival. Even the act of gathering materials was communal. When timber was needed, entire groups trekked miles across the mesas to find the right trees, singing to the forests before taking what they required. They thanked the tree for its life, for the gift of shelter it would provide. The work might have lasted weeks, months, years. But time meant something different here. The pace was dictated by the sun, the seasons, the patience of stone. They built not for glory, but for continuity, so that children yet unborn could live in the warmth of their walls. It's easy to forget how revolutionary this was, a people with no metal forging a civilization from sand and wool. Archaeologists have found evidence of thousands of structures across the Four Corners region, from the vast complexes of Chaco Canyon to the smaller, more intimate dwellings of Mesa Verde. Each follows the same language of design, balance, alignment, respect for the land. In a world obsessed with conquering nature, they achieve something better: cooperation with it. Their architecture isn't a scar upon the landscape. it's a heartbeat within it. When you look at Cliff Palace from a distance, it seems less built into the rock than grown from it, as if the canyon itself had sprouted walls and windows. This was their legacy, not steel, not empire, but harmony. Now the sky deepens into violet. The first stars appear, shy and trembling. You sit on a fallen beam, its wood turns silver by centuries, and the quiet settles like a cloak. In that stillness, you begin to see how their architecture wasn't merely functional, it was philosophical. The people built in circles, in spirals, in lines that returned to themselves. To them, time wasn't a road but a wheel. Every season returned, every life echoed another. Their homes reflected that belief, doorways facing the same direction, rooms arranged around central fires, kivas mirroring the curve of the heavens. To build was to participate in the circle, to mark one's place in the great turning of the world. Even now, the wind moving through these ruins feels circular. It enters, swirls, departs, and comes again. You sense that nothing here ever truly ends. As the night deepens, the cliffs fade into shadow. The dwellings blend with the rock until they seem invisible, only faint outlines where moonlight catches an edge or corner. And you realize, this is the ultimate expression of their craft. To create something so perfectly attuned to its surroundings that it disappears into them. To build not monuments, but continuations of the world itself. The ancestral Puebloans didn't need iron to forge their civilization. They used the oldest tools of all, observation, humility, and faith in the conversation between human and earth. Each wall, each tower, each kiva is a testament to that partnership. Even the silence that follows feels like applause, soft, eternal. You rise, dust on your hands, and turn back toward the trail. The canyon breathes behind you, a vast, sleeping cathedral. You glance once more at the dwellings tucked in the stone, fragile and eternal all at once, and understand that this, perhaps, is what humanity was always meant to build, not fortresses, not monuments, but homes that listen to the wind. Night has settled over the mesa, a soft dark woven with starlight. The air carries a clean chill, the kind that makes sound travel differently, crisper, slower, as though every noise must first pass through the memory of time itself. You follow the faint glow of moonlight down the narrow path until it ends at a circle of shadow, the mouth of a kiva, half buried in stone. The ladder rises from its center like the spine of the world. Each rung gleams faintly, polished smooth by centuries of hands. You pause, listening. The canyon wind has quieted. The air smells faintly of ash, dust, and earth. And then, almost imperceptibly, you feel it, that presence. The hush that gathers where something sacred sleeps. You descend. One hand, then the other. The wood feels alive beneath your palms, as though it remembers every touch, every prayer. The darkness closes around you, cool and comforting. Your feet find the packed clay floor. The silence here is not empty, it vibrates. You can hear your own heartbeat, slow and steady, matching the rhythm of something deeper, something that feels like the breath of the earth herself. You've entered the heart of their world. To the ancestral Puebloans, the kiva was not just a room. It was the axis of existence, a space where the physical and the spiritual touched. Every community had them, circular, sunken sanctuaries lined with stone benches, roofed with timber, their ceilings pierced by a single opening through which light, smoke, and spirit could move freely. Some were small and intimate, serving one extended family, others vast and communal, capable of holding dozens of people. Each was constructed with deliberate precision. At the center burned the hearth, the sacred fire, the living heart of the kiva. Beside it, a vent shaft drew in air from the outside, feeding the flames without suffocating the room. Nearby lay the sipapu, a small hole in the floor representing the portal from the underworld, the place from which all life had emerged. To sit here, in this circle of stone, was to sit within the story of creation itself. The kiva wasn't separate from daily life, it was life distilled. A space for ceremony, yes, for prayer, initiation, storytelling, but also for memory, for teaching, for community decisions made in the firelight. Here, beneath the world, the people kept their covenant with the unseen. Imagine an evening long ago. The sun has vanished behind the cliffs, and the air is turning cold. A handful of men descend into the kiva, one by one, carrying bundles of sage, small drums, and a bowl of glowing embers. Their sandals whisper against the ladder rungs. As they reach the floor, they move in silence, taking their places around the circle. The fire is coaxed to life, its light pulsing against the walls. Shadows sway across the plaster, figures of wind and flame, alive in the dancing glow. They begin to chant, low and steady. The sound reverberates through the chamber, building like a heartbeat. It's not a song meant for entertainment, but for alignment, a way of tuning the human body to the frequency of the world. Smoke curls upward through the roof opening, drifting into the stars. From above, anyone passing might see only a thin column of light and vapor rising from the rock. But here below, it is everything, the bridge between earth and sky, the breath of the ancestors leaving and returning again. In this sacred rhythm, inhale, exhale, firelight, darkness, the people believed balance was maintained. They did not pray for domination or wealth. They prayed for rain, for harmony, for the health of corn, the endurance of families, the peace of the spirits that walked between realms. Each spark that leapt from the fire carried a wish into the night. The architecture of the kiva mirrored their cosmology. Round, like the sun, like the horizon, like the cycle of seasons. The walls, curved and embracing, symbolized the womb of the earth. The roof, flat and solid, represented the surface world. To descend the ladder was to return to origins, to enter the body of the Earth Mother, to speak directly with her heart. No one entered lightly. Before ceremonies, participants purified themselves with smoke from burning sage and juniper. They rubbed their bodies with white clay or ash. Words were spoken softly, reverently, because the walls were believed to hear. In some kivas, archaeologists have found painted murals, red suns, zigzag lightning bolts, spirals representing water and wind. These weren't random decorations. They were maps of the spirit world, visual prayers meant to guide the participants' thoughts. When the firelight flickered over these symbols, the images seemed to move, alive with meaning. The ceremonies that took place here were as varied as the stars. Some marked the seasons, the solstices, the coming of the rains, the harvest. Others were rites of passage, when boys became men, when dancers took on the masks of spirits, when the living spoke the names of the dead. One ritual might call for silence so deep you could hear the fire crackle like bones shifting. Another would fill the kiva with music, drums, flutes, rattles, the rhythm of feet stamping the packed earth. The Kachina ceremonies, still practiced by the descendants of the Puebloans today, embody that ancient connection. The dancers wear masks representing sacred beings, spirits of rain, fertility, ancestors, the living powers of nature. When the mask is worn, the person disappears, the spirit speaks through them. The line between human and divine dissolves, just as it did in the kivas centuries ago. To outsiders, it might have looked like theater. But to them, it was the world's heartbeat made visible. Even when not in use, the kiva remained alive. It was tended, cared for, kept clean. The fire pit was covered, the ladder maintained. Children learned early to treat the kiva with respect. They could play near it, but not inside without permission. Their parents told them, "The ancestors listen here." And perhaps they did. Because these places were more than architecture, they were memory. The kiva kept the stories safe when no paper existed, when history was carried only in voice and ritual. Through repetition, the people remembered who they were. Every ceremony was a renewal of identity, a reassertion of belonging. The past was never behind them, it surrounded them, waiting to be spoken. In the fire's glow, imagine the faces. Wrinkled elders, eyes reflecting flame, Young initiates, nervous but awed. The rhythm of the drum deepens, slow as thunder over distant mesas. Someone begins to tell a story, the tale of emergence, the first journey from the underworld into this one. The storyteller's voice rises and falls, blending with the fire's crackle, with the breath of everyone listening. It's a story of transformation, of climbing toward light, of learning to live in harmony with the earth. And as you listen, you realize, it's also the story of every generation. To descend into the kiva was to descend into memory, to remind oneself that humanity's survival depends not on conquest, but on relationship, with the land, with water, with the unseen. When dawn came after such nights, the fire would be allowed to burn low, its smoke curling lazily through the roof opening. The people climbed the ladder back into morning light, emerging like seeds sprouting from soil. The transition was symbolic, deliberate. They had returned from the womb of the earth renewed. The prayers spoken below were carried upward by sunlight. It is said that even the birds' songs sounded different on those mornings, sweeter, more harmonious. The canyon wind gentler, as though the world had listened too. For in their belief, the universe was a living conversation. Humans spoke through ritual. The earth replied through weather, through harvest, through the language of the natural world. The kiva was where that conversation stayed alive. Archaeologists studying Mesa Verde and Chaco Canyon have unearthed hundreds of kivas, each with slight variations, some square, some circular, some linked by tunnels. Yet all share the same purpose, connection. In Chaco's grand complexes, great kivas could hold entire communities, roofed with massive beams, their walls adorned with plaster painted in sacred colors. At Mesa Verde, the smaller family kivas nestle like secret hearts beneath the dwellings, each one a universe unto itself. Standing within them today, you can still feel that pulse. The air moves differently here, heavier somehow, thick with history. Even the quiet hums. It's not superstition. It's resonance, the vibration of centuries of human breath, of words that meant survival, gratitude, continuity. And maybe, standing there in the half-light, you understand something. These people didn't build churches to escape the world. They built kivas to return to it. They didn't kneel before an image of divinity, they descended into its body. The fire, the smoke, the stars glimpsed through the roof hole, all of it was part of the same sacred anatomy. They lived within a cosmos that did not divide the human from the divine, the spiritual from the practical. Everything was one pulse, one endless breath. Even today, their descendants honor that rhythm. Modern Pueblo communities still maintain kivas at the heart of their villages. The dances and prayers continue, though cameras and outsiders are not permitted inside. The secrecy isn't exclusion, it's preservation. Some things must remain unphotographed, unrecorded, alive only in sound and flame. You climb the ladder once more, your fingers gripping the rungs slick with age. The air warms as you rise, and suddenly, the stars are there again, spread wide, infinite. The canyon stretches below, dark and luminous all at once. You look back down through the roof opening. The fire's glow flickers faintly, painting the stones with gold. It feels less like leaving and more like being exhaled. Because the kiva doesn't end where its walls do. Its spirit rises with you, threading upward into the night, into the endless spiral of stars. You realize now that this is what they built for, continuity. A bridge between worlds. A reminder that no life, no story, truly disappears. It only changes form, from earth to smoke, from fire to sky, from memory to wind. And the wind, eternal and patient, carries those prayers still. The mesa is silent except for its breathing, the long, slow sigh of centuries. The dwellings around you glow faintly in the moonlight, each one holding its own small shadow of the sacred. You walk the path again, the earth cool beneath your feet, your thoughts softened by what you've seen. The horizon begins to pale, a thin blade of silver splitting the dark. The first birds stir in the junipers above, and the wind, gentle and curious, brushes the edge of the canyon. Night releases its hold. The stars dim. You stand once more on the mesa rim, watching dawn unfold across a land that has always been both beautiful and merciless. To live here, in this dry, red-brown wilderness, was to live in negotiation with thirst. The ancestral Puebloans knew this well. They lived in a country that offered light in abundance, stone in plenty, but water only in whispers. And yet, somehow, they made that whisper into a song of survival. Look around you now, the canyons deep as silence, the mesas stretching flat and far, the air so dry it steals the moisture from your breath. Rain, when it comes, is sudden and fierce, a flash flood that cuts through the rock like a blade, vanishing as quickly as it appeared. Months may pass before the next storm. To most, this would seem an impossible home. But to the people of Mesa Verde, water wasn't an obstacle. It was a teacher. They studied its moods, how it ran off the cliffs after storms, where it pooled, where it hid in the stone. They learned to track its scent in the wind, to read its traces in the soil. Over generations, they developed a relationship with it so intimate that to them, water was not merely a substance. It was sacred consciousness. When they spoke of it, they called it lifeblood of the earth. Every drop was prayer. Every cloud, a blessing. Archaeologists have found the marks of their ingenuity scattered across the mesa like a quiet hymn to adaptation. See that small basin carved into the rock? That's not erosion. It's deliberate, a catchment hollow, shaped by human hands to hold rain. Some are no wider than a bowl, others the size of small ponds. After storms, they filled with precious water, reflecting the sky like eyes of the earth. Along the slopes, faint lines of stone appear, the remains of check dams. These low barriers slowed runoff, allowing water to seep into the soil rather than escape. Terraces were built along the canyon sides to capture every trickle. Nothing was wasted. And where springs bubbled faintly from cracks in the rock, they built small retaining walls, turning seepage into steady flow. You can still find them if you know where to look. Small wet places in an otherwise dry land, green with ferns, alive with dragonflies. These were holy sites. The people left offerings there, feathers, shells, bits of turquoise, gifts to the spirit of the water for its generosity. But the true miracle was not the engineering itself. It was the discipline. Every family understood the fragility of their world. Water was shared, not owned. It was fetched carefully at dawn and dusk, carried in clay jars across steep trails. The task was ritual, slow, deliberate, reverent. Picture it, a woman balancing a heavy pot against her hip, her shadow stretching long across the sand. The jar, made from the earth's own clay, breathes faintly through its walls, keeping the water cool. Each step is measured, every drop precious. She hums softly as she walks, a song of thanks learned from her mother, who learned it from hers. It is not a song of request but of gratitude. Water, you are patient. Water, you are kind. Stay with us a little longer. When she returns home, she pours the water carefully into a small storage jar, sealed with a corn husk lid. No one drinks until all have given thanks. Even washing was done with respect. A small handful at a time, used sparingly, returned to the earth. To waste water was to wound the spirit that sustained you. Their agriculture, too, reflected this reverence. In the shallow soil of the mesa tops, they cultivated corn, beans, and squash, the three sisters, each plant helping the other survive. Corn gave height and support, beans fixed nitrogen in the soil, and squash spread low, shading the ground to hold what little moisture remained. They planted not in neat rows but in small clusters, each seed placed by hand into the earth, accompanied by a prayer. The timing of planting was crucial. Too early, and the seedlings would wither under the sun. Too late, and the rains would miss them entirely. To know when to plant, they looked to the sky. The stars told them. The behavior of insects told them. The whisper of the wind through the canyon grasses told them. They watched everything. And when the first green shoots broke through the earth, the people danced, barefoot, with cornmeal on their hands and laughter in their throats. For them, each sprout was proof that the world still loved them enough to share its secrets. Water shaped not just their agriculture but their spirituality. To the ancestral Puebloans, rain was alive, a being with moods, a voice, and a will. They believed it listened. That's why their dances, their songs, their ceremonies often imitated the sound of rain or the movement of clouds. In kivas, they painted spirals and lightning bolts on the walls, symbols of rain's journey from sky to earth to underworld and back again. Their prayers were full of rhythm and breath, echoing the soft patter of falling drops. They even built shrines at high points, small circles of stone, open to the sky, where offerings of cornmeal and turquoise were left to invite the clouds. When storms finally came, the people would run to the cliffs, raise their arms, and shout their gratitude to the heavens. They danced in the rain, their laughter blending with thunder. For that brief, electric moment, the whole world felt awake. To them, water was not just something to survive by. It was a conversation with the divine. Archaeological evidence shows that even during the driest centuries, those long droughts that forced migrations and reshaped their world, the people's reverence for water never wavered. In fact, their ceremonies grew more intricate, their prayers more fervent. This wasn't desperation, it was dialogue. They didn't curse the sky for its silence. They asked what lesson was hidden in its stillness. Because for the ancestral Puebloans, drought was not punishment. It was part of the cycle, a time for humility, for recalibration. When the rains failed, they adapted. They dug deeper. They moved if they had to. And always, they remembered gratitude. Even in exile, they carried small stones from the springs they had left behind, reminders that water, like memory, always finds a way to return. You kneel beside one of those ancient basins now, a shallow bowl cut into the sandstone, rim smooth as glass. There's no rain today, no standing water, only a thin trace of moisture glinting in the first light of morning. But as you touch it, you feel the coolness seep into your fingers, and for a moment, it's as if the stone itself remembers. The basin was carved not just to hold rain, but to hold hope. You can almost see them here, hands shaping the hollow, laughter echoing across the canyon as children watched, dust swirling in the air. A community not at war with nature, but in dialogue with it. This was their wisdom, that the world is not conquered by strength, but courted through respect. And when water came, oh, when it finally came, the entire landscape rejoiced. The smell would arrive first, wet sage, hot dust turning dark, the sweetness of petrichor rising like incense. Then thunder would roll over the mesas, shaking the cliffs. The people would run to the edges, eyes wide with joy as lightning split the sky. Rain would pour in silver sheets, rushing down the stone faces, filling the basins, the terraces, the tiny canals that crisscrossed the fields. The earth would drink greedily, hissing as each drop sank into its skin. Children would stretch out their arms, spinning, laughing. Women would lift jars to the sky to catch the purest drops. Men would tilt their faces upward, mouths open, tasting life itself. And when the storm passed, the world would shine, wet rock glowing like bronze, the air alive with the smell of renewal. In that silence after rain, the people would whisper thanks. Always thanks. It's humbling, isn't it? To realize that an entire civilization rose and thrived in one of the harshest landscapes on earth, not by dominating it, but by listening to it. Their relationship with water wasn't technology, it was theology. They didn't build aqueducts to enslave it. They carved basins to welcome it. They didn't demand, they invited. And somehow, through that humility, they endured for centuries. Even when the great drought came, the one that eventually pushed them to leave Mesa Verde, they carried that reverence with them. To new valleys, new mesas, new homes, they brought the old songs, the old prayers, the old understanding that to live is to be in balance. You rise now, brushing dust from your hands. The sun has climbed above the cliffs, washing the canyon in pale gold. The air hums faintly with heat, the promise of another dry day. But in the quiet, you notice something, a faint trickle, almost hidden. You follow the sound, and there it is, a small spring seeping from a crack in the rock, water clear as glass, forming a thin ribbon that winds down into the sand. It's so small you could cover it with your hand, and yet, somehow, it feels immense, the heart of the world beating softly. You crouch, cup your palms, and drink. The water is cold, startlingly alive. For a moment, you understand everything they believed, that the world gives, if you approach it with reverence. That survival is not conquest, but communion. You stand again, the taste of ancient rain still on your tongue, and look toward the horizon. The cliffs shimmer in the sun. The air ripples with heat. Somewhere below, the dwellings of Mesa Verde wait in silence. The spring's coolness lingers on your palms as you walk away from the trickle of water. The sun climbs higher, burning the last traces of dew from the grass. The air smells of stone warming, of pinyon resin melting in the heat. You follow a faint trail along the cliff's edge, where the wind hums through cracks in the rock like breath through a flute. Water has taught them to listen. Now, the earth will teach them to create. Every civilization leaves its truest reflection not in its monuments but in its small, daily acts. The bowl that holds a meal, the jar that carries water, the handprint pressed into the side of a pot. And here, among the cliffs, that reflection was shaped in clay. The ancestral Puebloans were potters long before they were architects. Their hands understood the weight of earth, the balance of moisture, the patience of heat. The art of clay was not just craft, it was dialogue, a continuation of the same conversation they held with water, wind, and stone. Because clay, after all, is where all those elements meet. Imagine the scene: a woman kneels beside a dry riverbed, the morning still cool, the sky a vast blue dome. She carries a woven basket and a flat stone tool. Her eyes scan the earth, searching for the pale gray shimmer of clay beneath the surface. She finds it, a soft, yielding vein near the bend of the stream. She digs with care, scooping small handfuls, feeling the texture between her fingers. Too coarse, and it will crack. Too fine, and it won't hold its shape. She knows the difference by touch alone. The clay goes into her basket, layered with damp sand and straw. Later, she'll knead it at home, mixing it with ground volcanic ash or crushed potsherds, temper, to give the clay strength. Her movements will be slow, rhythmic, accompanied by humming. She will work until the mixture is smooth and pliant, cool under her palms. This is not labor, this is prayer. Because what she holds is more than soil, it's the flesh of the earth, the same substance from which her ancestors say humanity first emerged. To mold clay is to reenact creation, to bring form from formlessness. In the dwellings high above the canyon floor, potters sat near open doorways where light and breeze were kind. They shaped jars and bowls with coiled ribbons of clay, stacking each spiral upon the next, smoothing the surface with pebbles and scraps of gourd. No wheel, no mold, only intuition and muscle memory. The vessels grew slowly, alive under the hands that made them. A jar for storing corn, a bowl for grinding pigments, a cup for carrying sacred water from a spring. Each one different, yet all bound by the same grace, the curve of necessity elevated into beauty. Once shaped, the pots dried in the shade for days. The desert was harsh, and haste meant ruin. Cracks would spider through the clay if it dried too quickly. So the potters waited, checking the vessels each morning, touching the surface gently as though feeling the pulse of a newborn. When the time came, they built fires not of open flame but of smothered coals, the heat rising slowly, evenly. The scent of burning wood mingled with the smell of hot clay, sharp, earthy, eternal. As the pots hardened, the designs painted upon them came alive. And what designs they were! Black on white, red on buff, geometric, precise, hypnotic. spirals that seemed to spin when you turned the bowl in your hands, zigzags that echoed the path of lightning across the sky, step triangles for mountains, wavy lines for water, concentric circles for the sun. But these were not mere decorations. They were language. Each pattern carried meaning, a conversation between maker and world. The spiral spoke of life's journey, inward and outward, returning to itself. The lightning bolt was both danger and blessing, a symbol of rain's fierce generosity. The handprint was identity. I am here, I made this, I belong. And sometimes, hidden beneath the rim or inside the bowl, the potter would leave a small mark known only to her family, a tiny cross, a dot, a swirl, not signature, but story. The pots themselves were living things. When they cracked or broke, they weren't discarded carelessly. Fragments were buried, returned to the soil, as though the vessel's spirit had gone to rest. Because to them, even clay had a soul. It's easy, standing here centuries later, to think of art as something separate from survival. But in this world, the two were one. Pottery was practical. It carried water, stored grain, cooked food. But it was also ceremonial, used in offerings, in burials, in dances that called down the rain. Every household relied on it, yet every vessel was an act of reverence. To make a pot was to acknowledge the miracle of existence, that earth, when shaped by human hands, could hold life. And so, through clay, the ancestral Puebloans found permanence in a world of impermanence. The walls of their homes may crumble, but their pots, fragile yet enduring, remain. Unearthed centuries later, they still hum with the warmth of the hands that made them. Pick one up in a museum, and you can almost feel it, that faint pulse of intent, the echo of breath. The pot still remembers the prayer whispered into it before it met the fire. Among the most intricate of their creations were painted vessels, works of patience and devotion. To paint one required mastery not just of art but of chemistry. They made pigments for minerals and plants, iron for red, manganese for black, clay slips for white. Brushes were crafted from yucca fibers chewed soft at the tips. The paint was applied in fine strokes. No sketching, no second chances. A mistake meant starting over entirely. The designs were often symmetrical, mirrored across the vessel's body. Some scholars believe these patterns reflect celestial order, constellations, the balance of the four directions, the movement of the sun. Others say they are maps of myth, visual prayers for harmony. Maybe both are true. Because for a people who saw no boundary between art and spirituality, beauty was simply the shape of truth. There's a story told by their descendants, the Hopi, about Spider-Woman, the great weaver of life. She taught humans to spin, to weave, to make. She showed them how threads and patterns mirror the connections of the universe. Potters, too, were her students. Each vessel was a web, each design a thread between seen and unseen worlds. The circular form of the pot echoed the web itself, a microcosm of the infinite. When a potter sat before her work, she didn't just create, she participated in creation. The act of shaping, painting, and firing was a sacred dialogue, between woman and earth, between breath and matter, between time and eternity. And so, the art of clay was also an art of memory, each vessel a quiet record of belief. You can still trace their evolution through time. Early pottery was plain, gray, functional. Then came the black-on-white wares, elegant, mathematical, their lines as sure as compass points. Later, polychrome vessels bloomed in reds, yellows, and blacks, reflecting new trade networks, new ideas, new joys. Through pottery, we can almost see their world changing, droughts, migrations, adaptations. The style shifts, but the essence remains, symmetry, precision, reverence. It's as if, through every generation, the hands that shaped clay remembered the same lesson: beauty is a form of balance. You stop beside a small ruin now, half buried in sand. The sun is fierce, but in the shadow of a wall you notice something glinting. You brush away the dust. It's a potsherd, a fragment of black-on-white ware, its design still crisp despite the centuries. The edge curves gently, the surface cool beneath your fingers. The line painted across it ends abruptly, mid-pattern, like a sentence cut off in the middle of thought. You hold it up to the light, and suddenly you can imagine the rest of it, a bowl full of grain, perhaps, a jar resting by a hearth. You can almost see the potter herself, her hands steady, her gaze intent, painting the same line you now trace with your thumb. The fragment feels alive, as if the clay itself remembers being whole. You place it back where you found it. The earth reclaims it without sound. Through the art of clay, the ancestral Puebloans achieved what every civilization longs for, to speak across time. Their words were not written in ink but inscribed in spirals, painted in black on white, sealed by fire. Even now, when archaeologists uncover a jar intact, it feels less like discovery and more like conversation resumed. The vessels whisper of hands that shaped, fires that burned, lives that moved in rhythm with the land. They tell of patience and precision, of love and necessity entwined. And perhaps, too, they tell us something about ourselves, that creation is an act of listening, that art is simply the world seeing itself through human eyes. The wind rises again, swirling dust across the canyon floor. The shards of ancient pottery glint like stars scattered in daylight. Each one catches the sun, flashes once, and then falls still, tiny constellations of human memory, grounded in the earth. The trail bends once more, winding down through sun-baked slopes and whispering grass. The air is different here, softer, scented faintly with earth and life. Ahead lies the heart of the ancestral Puebloan world, the place where all stories, all prayers, all survival converged into a single, golden thread. Corn. Not just a crop. Not just food. But a living being, a spirit of endurance, generosity, and transformation. To the people of these mesas, corn was more than sustenance. It was the axis around which life turned, the heartbeat of ritual, economy, and identity. The same way blood runs through veins, corn ran through their culture. You can still feel it here, in the dry soil that once cradled green stalks, in the shallow terraces shaped by patient hands. The wind rustles through grasses, and for a moment it sounds like leaves whispering in an ancient field. Imagine it, dawn, 1,000 years ago. The sun peeks over the mesas, washing the land in rose light. Families emerge from the cliff dwellings, baskets slung across their backs, stepping carefully along the narrow paths that lead to the mesa top. There, the fields wait, uneven, stony, but alive with promise. The air smells of dew and dust. A man kneels, pressing his hand flat against the soil, feeling its coolness, its pulse. A woman hums softly as she drops kernels one by one into the shallow furrows. Each seed is placed by hand, never scattered. Each is accompanied by a prayer, a whisper of gratitude to the earth and the sky. Grow strong, she says. Feed us, as we will honor you. The first green shoots will rise in weeks, trembling in the wind. And when they do, the people will return with songs. Corn was not native to this mesa world. Its ancestors were small, wild grasses from distant southern valleys, brought north through centuries of trade and adaptation. But here, in the dry highlands of the Four Corners, it found a new destiny. The ancestral Puebloans became its caretakers, its partners. They coaxed it to flourish in thin soil, under an unrelenting sun. They learned to plant it deep, where hidden moisture lingered, and to space the stalks just far enough apart so that their roots would not compete. They read the sky before planting, watching for particular stars that heralded the right moment. The Pleiades rising just before dawn meant the earth was ready to receive seed. The cycle of heaven and the cycle of corn became one. And when the rains came, brief and fierce, they gathered the water in terraces and basins to feed the fields. Every droplet was used, every kernel guarded. Through patience and reverence, they turned scarcity into abundance. Corn's gift was more than nourishment. It was balance, a trinity of life shared with beans and squash, the three sisters. Together they formed a perfect alliance. Corn offered height, the strong stalk on which beans could climb. Beans replenished the soil with nitrogen, the invisible breath of fertility. Squash spread its broad leaves across the ground, shading the roots, keeping precious moisture trapped beneath. In their companionship, the people saw reflection, a lesson written in roots and leaves. Each supported the others, each thrived through cooperation. When they planted, they placed the three seeds in the same mound, pressing them into the earth side by side. When they harvested, they offered cornmeal to the wind in thanks. It was a small ritual, but one repeated across centuries, a daily acknowledgement that survival is never solitary. Corn was everywhere in their lives. In the morning, it was meal ground on metates, the rhythmic sound of stone against stone filling the air like slow percussion. Women's hands moved in a steady rhythm, forward, forward, muscles strong and sure from years of work. The ground maize became dough, thick and fragrant, baked on hot stones into flatbread. At midday, corn was soup simmering in clay pots, blended with beans and herbs. In the evening, it was parched kernels roasted near the fire, a comfort against the cold. But it wasn't only food. It was offering, medicine, identity. Yellow corn for the north. White corn for the east. Blue corn for the west. Red corn for the south. Black corn for the underworld, and speckled corn for the balance of all directions. Each color carried its own meaning, its own energy. In ceremonies, cornmeal was sprinkled in sacred places, along thresholds, into fire pits, across trails, to bless and protect. When a journey began, travelers carried a small pouch of cornmeal to offer to the winds. When a child was born, cornmeal was placed beside them, their first companion in life. Even in death, corn remained constant. Small handfuls were placed near the bodies of the departed, a promise that the spirit would never hunger. You can almost hear the echo of the grinding stones now, the rhythm of daily devotion. The sound isn't harsh, it's gentle, meditative, like breath itself. The women's songs accompany it, low, steady, rising with the dawn. They sing to the corn as they grind it, their voices blending with the scrape of stone. The words are simple, the meaning profound: gratitude, continuity, remembrance. Every meal, every loaf, every kernel passed from hand to hand carried the weight of history, proof that the people had kept their covenant with the land. The act of eating was an act of prayer. Corn's presence extended far beyond the mesa tops. Through trade networks stretching hundreds of miles, its dried ears traveled from village to village, valley to valley. From the Hopi mesas to the Zuni Pueblos, from the deserts of Arizona to the mountains of New Mexico, it became the thread linking communities. Along those routes came not just goods but stories, songs, and ceremony. Corn was the common language, the one offering every village understood. And wherever it went, it carried with it the same message: the earth is generous when you are humble before it. Archaeologists have found traces of ancient cobs and storage pits, their kernels long gone but their shapes preserved in ash. In some rooms, bowls of cornmeal still sit on shelves where they were left centuries ago, tiny mounds of dust now, but still recognizable as devotion. These remnants are not relics of survival, they are relics of gratitude. When droughts came, when the rains failed, the people didn't abandon their faith in corn. They turned to it even more. They held ceremonies, long nights of dance and chant, masks painted with symbols of lightning and cloud, songs that mimicked the rhythm of rain. They believed the spirit of corn could hear them, could intercede with the sky. And sometimes, against all odds, the rain returned. Was it coincidence? Faith? Or simply the patience of a people who understood the cycle of time better than we ever will? Among the Hopi, descendants of the ancestral Puebloans, a saying endures: "We are the corn people." It's not metaphor. It's truth. They believe the first humans were formed from yellow and white corn, shaped by the hands of divine beings, their hearts infused with the spirit of breath. To eat corn is to return to one's origin, To plant it is to ensure the continuity of creation itself. That belief reaches backward through centuries, all the way to these cliffs. When you stand among the ruins of Mesa Verde, surrounded by silence and sun, you can almost feel it still, that living connection between body and grain, between earth and sky. The dust beneath your feet once cradled the roots of sacred plants. The wind brushing your cheek once carried the scent of ripening fields. You kneel now beside a small, ancient terrace. The soil is dry but still fertile, a deep brown scattered with bits of pottery and stone. You reach down, scoop a handful, and let it fall through your fingers. The grains slide away like time itself. For a heartbeat, you imagine planting a seed here, a single kernel, golden as the sun. You cover it with soil, press your palm against the ground, and wait. You can almost feel the response, faint, pulsing, alive. The same rhythm that guided generations before you. If you were to stay, if you were to return after the rains, you might find a small shoot breaking the surface, fragile yet defiant, reaching upward toward the light. It would be the same miracle they witnessed every year, life returning from the dust. And you would understand why they called corn not a crop but a gift. Because it asked for care, but gave infinitely more in return. As the sun climbs higher, the mesa shimmers with heat. The world feels suspended in a golden stillness. You close your eyes and listen, to the wind, to the faint hum of insects, to the whisper of what once was. Somewhere in that silence you hear them again, the songs of the people in their fields, the low hum of gratitude rising like heat from the earth. They sing to corn, but also to everything that made its life possible, the rain, the soil, the sun, and themselves. It is not worship as we know it, it is conversation. A promise renewed, we will care for you, as you have cared for us. Corn, clay, water, stone, all threads of the same fabric, woven by hands that understood connection better than most of us do now. The ancestral Puebloans lived not in defiance of the desert but in harmony with its demands. They found abundance in scarcity, beauty in necessity, and spirit in every act of creation. Their world was one of reciprocity. To take was to give, to live was to honor, to plant was to pray. And though their fields have long since fallen silent, their lessons remain, buried in the soil, waiting for those who still know how to listen. The wind rises again, carrying with it the scent of sun-warmed sage. It moves through the canyons, over the cliffs, through the silent dwellings, stirring ancient dust. By midday, the mesa glows like bronze under the unrelenting sun. Heat ripples in the air, bending the horizon, and from the cliffs below comes the echo of cicadas, a slow, rising hum that seems to pulse in time with the heart of the land itself. This is the age of fullness. The long centuries of wandering, of trial, of learning to coax life from a stingy desert have brought the people to their pinnacle. The world of the ancestral Puebloans has ripened. Mesa Verde, the green table. A fitting name, given by a later tongue, but even now the mesa earns it. High above the arid valleys, small forests of pinyon and juniper still crown the ridges, their resinous scent mixing with the sweetness of sage. Here, between heaven and stone, a civilization once flourished, balanced perfectly between endurance and grace. If you could stand on this mesa in the 12th century, around the year 1200, you'd see it alive, shimmering with movement, with purpose, with life. From the ridgelines, thin columns of smoke rise from hundreds of hearths. The cliffs hum with sound, laughter, voices calling across canyons, the steady clack of stone tools shaping new blocks for walls. The cliff dwellings are finished now, no longer experiments, but masterpieces. Cliff palace, spruce tree house, balcony house, each a living labyrinth of rooms and towers, plazas and kivas. At dusk, the light touches every sandstone wall, turning them gold, then rose, then deep red as the sun sinks away. The people watch from their terraces, faces glowing in the same color as the cliffs, their shadows long against the stone. It is a world in balance, not an empire, not a kingdom, but something quieter, more deliberate, a network of communities bound by kinship, trade, and faith. From a distance, the great dwellings appear still, silent. But step closer, and you'll feel the pulse of daily life. Children run along ledges, chasing one another, their laughter bouncing from wall to wall. Women grind corn in rhythm, their mates singing the same deep music that has echoed here for generations. Men return from the mesa tops with baskets of crops and bundles of firewood. In the plazas, artisans sit cross-legged, carving bone needles, shaping turquoise beads, smoothing new pots with gourd scrapers. The air smells of maize and smoke, of roasting meat, of damp clay drying in the shade. Everywhere there is motion, purposeful, communal, graceful. At the center of it all, the kivas glow with the warmth of fires. Below the dwellings, their circular forms breathe in the dark, chambers of prayer, of counsel, of continuity. The world above and the world below are one body. Trade has grown wide. The people of Mesa Verde no longer live in isolation. From the south, traders bring the sheen of macaw feathers, brilliant reds and greens carried across hundreds of miles. From the west, shells come from distant oceans, their pearly insides glinting like trapped moonlight. From the north and east, turquoise, that sacred blue stone, bright as rain, moves from hand to hand, worn as amulets, woven into cloth, set into jewelry. Pottery, too, travels along these routes, fine black on white bowls from Chaco, painted redware from Kayenta, each style carrying whispers of another village, another sky. Through trade, stories move. Ideas shift. Languages mix. But the foundation remains the same: respect, reciprocity, balance. Trade is not conquest, it is relationship, an act of kinship between distant mesas. When a traveler arrives, he is welcomed, fed, and offered shelter. His goods are weighed not in gold or silver, but in usefulness, in beauty, in story. The architecture has grown more ambitious now. Some dwellings climb 5 stories high, stacked neatly into the curve of the cliffs. Towers rise from plazas, circular and square, perhaps used for observation or ceremony. Stonework is fine, edges sharp, joints tight, mortar smooth as skin. Ladders connect levels like veins of wood, running from darkness to light. Every structure faces the sun. The alignment is precise, each doorway and window tuned to the rhythm of light, tracking solstices and equinoxes. When winter's low sun pierces the openings of certain rooms, its light strikes painted symbols within, spirals, crosses, circles. To us they may seem decorative. To them, they were calendars, sacred instruments marking the dance of time. This is not merely architecture. It is astronomy, theology, and art woven into one. Each dwelling, each room, each kiva was built with an awareness that everything, shadow, season, wind, flame, has meaning. To live here was to inhabit a cosmos of precision and poetry. At night, the cliffs glow faintly with firelight. Smoke drifts upward in thin threads, carrying the scent of juniper. The wind slips between the dwellings, whispering through open windows. You can almost hear it, the low murmur of conversation, the laughter, the beat of small drums. A child cries, a mother hushes him with a lullaby. A storyteller begins to speak, his voice echoing against the stone, tales of creation, of emergence, of the hero twins who chase the sun. Overhead, the stars blaze so clearly that you can see the Milky Way as a river of light, the same celestial river that guides souls after death. The people watch it as their ancestors did, as their descendants still do. The heavens are not distant here. They are immediate, intimate, part of the daily rhythm, woven into every breath. The community thrives not because of wealth or expansion, but because of relationship. Every act, no matter how small, connects to something greater. Grinding corn is prayer. Repairing a wall is remembrance. Sharing food is ceremony. And through it all runs a quiet code of balance. Take what you need, give back what you can, and remember the ancestors who walk beside you, unseen. This philosophy shapes not only their daily life but their social order. Leadership here is not domination but stewardship. Elders guide through wisdom, not force. Councils decide by consensus. The people are bound not by fear, but by shared responsibility. This is a civilization of cooperation, not conquest. Even the seasons themselves are part of the cycle of belonging. Spring is a time of renewal, ceremonies in the kivas to welcome the planting season. Summer brings the green shimmer of cornfields on the mesa tops, and with it, the hum of bees, the rustle of stalks, the scent of rain. Autumn means harvest, celebration, laughter echoing down the cliffs as families gather to store grain, to roast squash and corn, to give thanks for the earth's generosity. Winter draws them inward, into the kivas, into story, into memory. The fires burn long, songs and dances honor the spirits who keep the sun moving and the world alive. In this cycle, every season holds its own beauty, its own work, its own meaning. And in this rhythm, the people find harmony, with themselves, with one another, with the land that holds them. At the height of Mesa Verde's prosperity, perhaps 2,000 people lived here. A network of villages stretched across the mesas, each connected, each dependent on the others. They traded, visited, married across canyons. From above, it might have looked like a constellation, small lights flickering in the vast dark, each one alive, each one essential. But as with all things bound to the earth, this harmony would not last forever. Already, subtle changes were beginning, longer droughts, shifting winds, smaller harvests. The people felt it first not in catastrophe, but in silence, springs running lower, clouds passing without rain, the song of the land turning uncertain. Yet in this moment, this golden century, they did not yet know the end. They lived fully, joyously, with faith that the cycle would always return. And so they built higher, dug deeper, prayed louder. Their kivas burned bright. Their fields still shimmered green. Their pots gleamed in firelight. Their songs rose like birds into the night. This was their height, their flowering, a civilization so in tune with the earth that even its fading would be graceful, deliberate, filled with meaning. You stand now on the edge of Cliff Palace as the sun begins to descend. Shadows stretch across the plaza. The walls, golden moments ago, turn the color of embers. The air cools. Somewhere far below, the call of a hawk echoes off the canyon walls, long, mournful, beautiful. You imagine them here in these final centuries, children playing, elders watching the light fade, smoke drifting upward as evening meals are cooked. They could not have known how soon the balance would falter, how drought and change and migration would one day empty these rooms. For now, the city breathes. It hums with life. You close your eyes and listen. You can hear it, the pulse of a world in perfect rhythm with itself. This is Mesa Verde at its height, radiant, alive, eternal. Evening falls again across the cliffs, soft as breath. The last light slides from the upper mesas and sinks into the canyon's quiet hollows. Smoke rises from a few distant hearths, fragile against the darkening sky. The air smells of juniper and ash, of the desert cooling. For a moment, the world seems still, caught between heartbeat and silence. Yet underneath that stillness, something begins to change. You can feel it first in the wind. It no longer smells of rain. It carries dust instead, fine, dry, restless. It moves through the canyons differently now, like a voice searching for what it has lost. The people of Mesa Verde notice it too. Springs run thinner. Streams that once sang through the valleys whisper only faintly. Clouds pass overhead, heavy with promise but withholding their gift. The great balance that sustained this place for centuries begins, quietly, to tremble. At first, they do what they've always done. They pray. In the kivas, the fires burn long into the night. Men and women gather, chanting the old songs that have always called the rains. Dancers wear masks of lightning and cloud, their feet drumming the rhythm of thunder onto the packed earth. But the skies remain empty. Days stretch into weeks, then into seasons. Crops grow brittle, stunted. The earth cracks open like dry pottery. Even the wind feels tired, heavy with heat. The old ones whisper that the world is shifting, that perhaps the people have forgotten something sacred, that the spirits of rain have turned away. Others say it is the natural rhythm, that drought has come before and will pass again. But the drought doesn't pass. It deepens. Archaeologists will one day read these years in the language of pollen and ash, rings of ancient trees shrinking tight with thirst, layers of soot from long, desperate fires. They will find the marks of famine, smaller kernels of corn, bones of animals eaten to the last scrap. But the people living through it don't need science to tell them what they already know. The land they have trusted is faltering. Each morning, families climb the ladders to their fields, hoping for signs of green. Each evening, they return with baskets half empty. Children cry from hunger. Elders grow thin. The people begin to ration their stores of grain, measuring each meal with quiet precision. Still, they endure, for endurance is what they know best. They have survived hardship before. They have survived cold winters, lean harvests, years when the rains came late. But this is different. This is not a season. It is a silence. When water grows scarce, so does peace. Communities that once traded freely now guard their resources carefully. Small tensions flicker, first as whispers, then as arguments, then as the crack of stone against stone. Defensive walls appear where none were needed before. Towers once used for observation may now serve as watchposts. Some families leave their cliff dwellings and build new homes on the mesa tops, closer to what little farmland remains. Others retreat deeper into the canyons, searching for hidden springs. The world that once felt infinite begins to close in. And yet, through it all, the people still hold to ritual. They still light the fires. Still grind cornmeal, even when there is little to grind. Still tell the stories that remind them who they are. Because even in the face of loss, identity must not be allowed to fade. The drought lasts not 1 year, not 2, but decades. By the 1270s, the land that once fed hundreds grows brittle and bare. Fields that once shimmered with green are now gray and cracked. The air itself feels brittle, full of dust. Archaeologists will call it the Great Drought. But to those who lived it, it was simply the world growing silent. Some villages are abandoned. Others consolidate, families moving together for safety. Pottery styles change, evidence of migration, of adaptation. But the signs are clear. The people are preparing to leave. They have lived here for centuries, carved their homes from stone, painted their prayers onto walls, buried their ancestors beneath the floors of their kivas. To leave is not just to move. It is to unweave their entire world. Still, they do not leave in despair. The ancestral Puebloans believe in cycles, in emergence, in migration, in the rhythm of departure and return. They know that nothing in the world stands still, not water, not wind, not life itself. So when the time comes, they do what they have always done, they listen. The elders consult the signs, the stars, the behavior of animals, the shape of clouds. The priests interpret dreams, the way the smoke curls from the kiva fires, the sound of the wind through the canyon's mouth. When the message becomes clear, when they know the spirits have spoken, they begin to prepare. They will go where the rains still fall, where new land waits, where the ancestors call them onward. The migration begins quietly. One family at first, then another, then whole clans, moving slowly down the canyons, carrying baskets of corn, sacred seeds, and the memory of the cliffs they leave behind. They take with them not possessions, but continuity. In the empty dwellings, the signs of their departure remain. Half-filled bowls still sit on shelves. Tools lie where they were last used. Footprints mark the dust near hearths now cold. Archaeologists will one day marvel at how sudden it appears, as if the people simply vanished overnight. But it wasn't sudden. It was deliberate. They left not because they failed, but because they understood that life must follow the water. Before leaving, they performed ceremonies, closing rituals to release the spirits that guarded their homes. In the kivas, they offered cornmeal to the fire, whispered prayers to the ancestors, and sealed the entrances with stone and clay. To them, the act of leaving was sacred. To remain too long in a place whose balance was broken would be to defy the natural order. So they left with reverence, carrying the song of the cliffs with them. The journey was long. Across mesas, through valleys, following the riverbeds southward. They traveled by season, by instinct, by stars. Some went toward the Rio Grande, where water still flowed. Others moved toward the Hopi mesas, where rain fell in summer bursts. Wherever they went, they carried pieces of their old world, pottery shards, seeds, sacred feathers, stories whispered to children at night. And as they settled in new lands, they built again, new kivas, new homes, new fields. The old ways endured, reshaped but unbroken. Their songs changed to fit new skies, but the rhythm remained the same, the rhythm of endurance. And in their prayers, they remembered Mesa Verde. Not as a loss, but as a chapter in the great cycle of emergence. A place that had given them form and then released them into new beginnings. Centuries later, when explorers and settlers first stumbled upon the ruins, they saw only silence. Empty rooms, blackened hearths, the wind moving through doorways. They called the people who built them the vanished ones, but nothing truly vanished. The descendants of those who walked away still live in the Pueblos of the Southwest, the Hopi, the Zuni, the Acoma, the Taos, and many more. In their ceremonies, in their songs, in the cornmeal they still scatter to the wind, Mesa Verde breathes. The people did not disappear. They transformed. Like seeds carried on the wind, they took root elsewhere. The spirit of their civilization did not die, it dispersed, woven into the living cultures that still thrive today. And yet, when you stand here now, the silence feels profound. The dwellings glow faintly in the twilight, empty and eternal. The kivas are cold, their fires long extinguished. The wind moves through the ruins like a voice remembering its lines. You can almost imagine the last night, the final fires burning low, the last prayers spoken. Families gathering their things, touching the walls one last time. Children half asleep, carried on their parents' backs. At the canyon's edge, they would have looked back, seen their homes shining faintly in the moonlight, and whispered farewell. Not goodbye, but thank you. Then they would have turned toward the darkness, toward the unknown, following the rhythm of wind and spirit. And the cliffs, now emptied, would have sighed once, the sound of centuries exhaling, before falling silent. The vanishing is not tragedy. It is transformation. Every civilization must learn when to let go, when to move on, when to follow the invisible call of change. The ancestral Puebloans knew this. They read it in the stars, in the bones of the land, in the language of drought and wind. To stay would have been to forget their own teachings. So they chose to honor them instead, to continue the great migration that defines not just their history, but all human history. We, too, are migrants of time, always moving forward, leaving behind the places that once defined us. The people of Mesa Verde were no different. They walked away not into oblivion, but into continuity, into the next song, the next field, the next rising sun. The wind grows stronger now, threading through the ruins, lifting a thin veil of dust that glitters in the fading light. The dwellings seem to breathe again for a moment, doorways glowing, shadows shifting, as if the past has returned to say one last thing before fading back into stone. And if you listen, truly listen, you might hear it. We did not disappear. We changed our form. We live where the rain still falls, where the corn still grows, where our children still dance for the sky. These walls were our bodies. The wind is our voice. And we are still here. The sun slips completely below the horizon. The mesa darkens. The canyon exhales. You stand in the silence they left behind, a silence not of emptiness, but of completion. The story of Mesa Verde has reached its twilight, but not its end. The dawn comes slowly. Pale light seeps over the horizon, brushing the cliffs with gray and gold. A thin wind moves through the canyons, stirring the dust that has lain undisturbed for centuries. It passes through the hollow windows of abandoned dwellings, through kivas long cold, through doorways that once echoed with laughter. This is what remains. The afterbreath of a civilization. The quiet heartbeat of empty cities. You walk through them now, step by step, careful where the stone crumbles underfoot. The air is thin, light as parchment. Even the birds are silent, as if they, too, understand that this is sacred ground, a place where time itself moves differently. At first glance, the cliff dwellings look almost as they must have in life. Walls still stand, rooms still hold their shapes, ladders still lean against ledges as if waiting for hands that will never return. The sunlight pours into the plazas, soft and golden. Dust hangs in the beams like slow-moving smoke. From a distance, you could believe that the people have only stepped away, that any moment now, someone will appear in the doorway, carrying a jar of water, calling to a child. But no one comes. Only the wind answers. You enter one of the dwellings. The doorway is small, forcing you to bow, a gesture that feels like reverence, even if unintended. Inside, the air is cool and still. The room is small, its walls darkened by centuries of soot. On the floor lies a broken bowl, its painted spiral still visible, black on white. In the corner, a grinding stone rests where it was last used. Near the hearth, a handful of charred wood still clings to its shape, as if the fire has only just died. It feels wrong to move anything, to disturb this quiet. The emptiness here is not neglect, it is remembrance. Each object seems to hold its breath, waiting for the return of the hands that placed it there. Outside, the cliffs are alive with echoes. You can hear them if you stand very still. The soft clatter of pots being stacked. The murmur of voices speaking across courtyards. The bark of a dog somewhere down the canyon. A child's laugh rising, falling, fading. They are not ghosts, not in the sense of haunting. They are memories made of sound, caught in the hollow of the rock, released each time the wind passes through. This is what time does in places like this. It doesn't erase, it transforms. The walls remember. The air remembers. And now, so do you. The archaeologists who first entered these ruins in the late 1800s must have felt something similar, awe tinged with sorrow. They lowered themselves by rope into the cliff dwellings, their boots kicking loose small avalanches of dust. When their lanterns flickered to life, the ancient world awakened before them. They found rooms still filled with life's residue, tools, baskets, corn cobs, even sandals woven from yucca fiber. Some walls still bore faint traces of red paint, symbols untouched by light for centuries. It must have felt as if time had stopped mid-breath, as if the people had simply walked out moments ago. They called them the Cliff Dwellers, and later the Anasazi, a name given by others, not their own. And though their intentions were often driven by curiosity, sometimes by greed, what they uncovered was more than history. It was a revelation, the endurance of human hands, the permanence of devotion. You can almost imagine that first flicker of lamplight sweeping across the walls, illuminating the faces of explorers who could scarcely comprehend what they'd found. A city carved into stone. A civilization preserved by silence. Every bowl, every tool, every trace of life frozen in the act of being. Some took artifacts, carried them away to museums. Some studied, catalogued, and measured. But others simply stood in the stillness, understanding that this was not a ruin to be conquered. It was a memory to be listened to. Because these empty cities are not empty at all. They are full of breath, of memory, of presence. The people who built them are still here in the rhythm of the walls, in the shape of each doorway, in the precision of the stonework. They are here in the balance of silence and sound. You climb higher, stepping carefully along the narrow paths that weave between the dwellings. The cliffs rise around you like the ribs of the earth, enclosing you in their vast, ancient embrace. From this height, the canyon spreads below like a sea of bronze. The wind slides upward, carrying the scent of sage, of stone warmed by the sun. You stop, and for a long moment you see it, not the ruins, but the city as it was. The plaza's alive with people, smoke rising in thin ribbons. The hum of conversation, the laughter of children. The golden corn drying in the sun. The clatter of tools. The songs echoing from kivas at dusk. You blink, and the vision fades, leaving only silence. But even that silence feels alive, as though the land itself is still remembering. Empty cities are strange things. They speak without words. The cliff dwellings are not ruins in the way we think of ruins, not broken remnants of decay. They are pauses in time, preserved mid-motion. The ancestral Puebloans didn't fall, they moved. The city didn't die, it rested. It's as if the canyon itself is waiting for the people to return, keeping everything ready, the walls, the ladders, the quiet. You can almost believe that on some other plane, they still live here, the fires still burning, the kivas still glowing, the songs still rising through the smoke toward the stars. And maybe in some way they do. The emptiness here has texture. In the cool shadow of a kiva, you feel it pressing gently against your skin. In the open plazas, it hums faintly in your ears, like the sea held far away. This is not abandonment, it's transformation. The people left, but their presence thickened the air. It lingered. It filled every crevice, every hollow in the stone. It turned silence into something you can almost hear, a resonance, a vibration that lives beneath the sound of the wind. And perhaps that is the true gift of Mesa Verde, that it teaches us silence is not absence. It is memory speaking in another language. As the day warms, light pours deeper into the ruins, painting the walls with gold. Shadows retreat into corners. The cliff face glows, and for a heartbeat, it feels like the dwellings are breathing, inhaling the light, exhaling the centuries. A small lizard darts across a ledge. A hawk glides overhead, its shadow sliding like a whisper across the walls. The world moves slowly, gently. Even in emptiness, life persists. Moss grows where ancient hands once smoothed mortar. In cracks of stone, small flowers bloom, yellow, purple, defiant. Rainwater gathers in shallow depressions, reflecting the sky where once fires reflected faces. The cities live on, not as human homes, but as sanctuaries for the world itself. It is as though the land, having absorbed the human heartbeat for so long, has learned to carry it forward. You find yourself in one of the larger kivas now. The roof is gone, open to the sky. The bench that once circled the wall is half crumbled, the fire pit filled with dust. But still, the circular shape remains, the endless loop of memory. You step down the ancient ladder and stand at its center. Above you, the blue of the sky turns slowly, endlessly. You speak aloud, softly, without meaning to. The sound echoes back, low and resonant, filling the chamber. For a moment, it feels like someone answers. And maybe they do. Maybe this is what the ancestral Puebloans meant when they built these places. That communication doesn't end with time. That the stones, if you listen, will always speak. When the archaeologists and travelers named these ruins lost cities, they misunderstood something essential. Nothing here is lost. The people did not vanish into myth. They simply changed their shape, their homes, their horizons. The cliffs remember them. The descendants remember them. The earth itself remembers them. And now, standing here, you remember too. Because history is not a straight line, it's a circle, like the kiva, like the spiral painted on ancient pots. What leaves returns. What ends begins again. These cities are not empty, they are waiting. Waiting for us to understand that the past is not behind us. It surrounds us, breathing quietly beneath our feet. The sun begins to set again, casting long shadows across the canyon. The light turns molten, sliding down the stone until the dwellings glow like embers. One by one, the alcoves darken. The wind picks up, carrying the scent of evening, sage, dust, smoke from faraway fires. And in that fading light, the empty cities seem to shimmer, half real, half memory. You feel the presence of all who have ever lived here, not as ghosts, but as continuity. Their breath in the wind, their warmth in the stone, their prayers in the stillness. You whisper a word of thanks, not to the ruins, but to the lives that made them. For even in silence they speak. Even in absence they remain. Night deepens. The stars return, cold and clear. The canyon fills with shadow. Somewhere far off, an owl calls, a sound both lonely and eternal. You stand at the edge of the cliff, looking out over the vast dark. The dwellings below lie hidden now, swallowed by night. But you know they're there, waiting, patient as the stone itself. Night recedes slowly from the cliffs. The first blush of morning stretches across the mesa, painting the sandstone in the palest gold. The wind, always the first to awaken, stirs the sagebrush and whispers down into the alcoves, brushing against the stone walls of dwellings that have slept for 7 centuries. For generations, the canyons have held their silence like a secret. Seasons have come and gone. Rains have carved deeper channels. Junipers have taken root in the cracks where corn once grew. Owls and foxes now make their homes in the old rooms, nesting in the same corners where children once slept. Time has wrapped the place in quiet, but not in forgetting. And then, one winter morning, the silence is broken. It happens by accident, as rediscoveries often do. In the year 1888, 2 ranchers, Richard Wetherill and his brother-in-law Charlie Mason, are riding across the mesa top, following the trail of stray cattle through snow. The air is bitter, the sky a hard, pale blue. The horses move slowly through the drifts. They know this land well, every ridge, every shadowed canyon. But on this day, something catches their eyes. Through the curtain of snow, they see what looks like windows, tiny rectangles cut into the sheer face of a cliff across the canyon. At first, they think it's a trick of the light. But when the sun breaks through, the illusion becomes unmistakable. There, tucked beneath a great overhanging ledge, lies a city. An entire city of stone, hidden in plain sight. They ride closer, hearts pounding, leading their horses to the canyon's edge. What they see takes their breath away. Hundreds of rooms stacked in perfect rows. Towers rising from plazas. Doorways and ladders preserved as if waiting for their makers to return. The dwellings seem impossibly suspended in the cliff face, glowing amber in the winter sun. Snow falls softly, melting against the stone. The world is utterly still. Cliff Palace, Wetherill will later call it, though at that moment, words fail him. For the first time in centuries, human eyes look upon Mesa Verde not as ruin, but as revelation. They descend carefully into the canyon, lowering themselves by rope, hearts pounding with awe and fear. The air grows cooler as they near the alcove. Their footsteps echo softly, a sound no human ear has heard here in 700 years. Inside, they find rooms still intact. Corn cobs lie in baskets, dried and fragile. Grinding stones rest where they were last used. Pottery shards gleam in the dust. The explorers whisper without meaning to, their voices reverent, almost afraid to disturb the hush. The silence presses against them, immense, alive. They pick up a pot, marvel at its perfection, black on white, smooth as glass, the design still sharp. One of them says softly, "They've only just left." And in a way, he isn't wrong. Word spreads quickly. Within months others come, scientists, adventurers, collectors, and looters. Some come to study, others to take. The canyons fill with voices again, for better and for worse. Shovels bite into ancient soil. Artifacts are carried away in wagons, sold to museums and private collections. The old world, which had rested untouched for centuries, is torn open under the eager hands of modern curiosity. Yet even amidst the loss, something deeper stirs: fascination, reverence, awe. The realization that this was no primitive village, but a civilization of complexity and grace. Reporters write of a lost people. Scientists debate their origins. Artists paint the cliff dwellings bathed in sunset gold. Poets describe them as cities of silence, ghost homes, temples in the stone. For the first time, the wider world begins to listen to the whispers of Mesa Verde. But the land itself does not easily surrender its mysteries. For every question answered, a dozen more arise. Who were they? Where did they go? Why did they leave? The stones offer no direct reply. They keep their language, spiral, line, symbol, hidden within their walls. Some say the people vanished overnight, carried away by catastrophe. Others speak of war, of famine, of drought. But those who truly walk the land, the descendants of the ancestral Puebloans, know the truth is gentler. They did not vanish. They journeyed on. To the Hopi and Zuni and other Pueblo peoples, the rediscovery is not revelation, but remembrance. Mesa Verde is not a mystery, it is a relative. Its dwellings are not ruins, but ancestors. Years pass. The explorers move on, but the canyon remains. In 1906, the U.S. government establishes Mesa Verde National Park, the first in the nation created to protect human history rather than wilderness alone. Archaeologists arrive with better tools, deeper respect. They begin to map and document rather than to take. The work is careful, reverent. Each stone is measured. Each pot shard catalogued. They learn to read the architecture like text, the way the kivas aligned with solstice light, the way certain walls echoed the curve of the canyon, the way water systems were engineered with mathematical precision. They discover that these people were astronomers, hydrologists, artists, and philosophers all at once, masters of living within, not above, their world. And the more they study, the more they realize, this was not a lost civilization. It was a lesson. Visitors come now from every corner of the world. They stand on the rim of the canyon, gazing down at the cliff dwellings, their breath caught in their throats. Some come for history, some for beauty, some without knowing why. They lower their voices instinctively, as if entering a church. They trace the outlines of doorways, the grooves in the stone where ladders once rested. They feel the warmth still trapped in the rock from the morning sun. And many, standing there, feel something deeper, a quiet stirring that isn't quite knowledge, isn't quite belief. It's recognition. The sense that these stones remember something essential about what it means to be human, to build, to endure, to leave, to be remembered. If you walk through the ruins today, you'll notice the silence isn't truly silent. It breathes. The wind still slips through doorways, singing in low tones. The ravens still circle above, their cries echoing against the canyon walls. The light still moves across the rooms exactly as it did centuries ago, tracing its patient arc from morning to dusk. Time continues, but the place remains. You might see archaeologists working carefully in the dust, their brushes sweeping away centuries one grain at a time. You might see descendants of the Pueblo peoples visiting quietly, leaving cornmeal offerings near the kivas, whispering words in languages older than these cliffs. In those moments, the ancient and the modern meet, not in opposition, but in continuity. The rediscovery, it turns out, was never about finding what was lost. It was about remembering what was never gone. There's a story told among the Pueblo people, that the ancestors built their homes high in the cliffs not to hide, but to listen. From those heights, they could hear the world's heart more clearly, the wind, the rain, the echo of their own songs. Perhaps that is what we rediscovered, too, the sound of listening itself. For in this place, every whisper of wind is a voice from the past. Every beam of light on sandstone is a touch of memory. The rediscovery of Mesa Verde is not the return of knowledge to us. It is our return to the knowledge the land has carried all along. Even now, when night falls over the park and the visitors have gone, the cliffs glow faintly under the moon. Shadows of walls fall against the canyon floor, and the wind drifts through the hollow dwellings with the gentleness of breath. Somewhere, perhaps, the echo of laughter lingers, a fragment of ancient joy caught between stone and air. You stand there, under the same stars that once guided the people who lived here, and you realize that time has folded in on itself. They are not behind us. They are beside us. Their homes are our lessons, their silence our mirror. The rediscovery was never theirs. It was ours, a rediscovery of humility, of reverence, of belonging to the same earth that shaped them. The canyon grows darker now. The night deepens. Far off, thunder murmurs, a faint reminder that rain still comes to this land, that water still carves its ancient paths, that life continues. And you think of those first explorers, lanterns trembling in their hands as they stepped into the cliff dwellings. You think of the Pueblo elders, speaking softly to the spirits who still linger here. You think of the wind that never stopped carrying their voices. You look once more at the dwellings, their windows glowing faintly under starlight, and you feel it, the continuity of human presence, stretching across 1,000 years, unbroken. Mesa Verde was never lost. It was only waiting for us to remember how to see. The wind shifts again, brushing past you, gentle and cool. It carries a faint scent of sage, of rain far away, of memory returning home. And as you turn from the cliffs, the story moves with you, from rediscovery to renewal, from what we've found to what still lives. Because the story of Mesa Verde does not end in ruin or silence. It ends, as all good stories do, in inheritance. The morning comes with the softness of memory, a pale light spilling across the mesas, touching the cliffs as if greeting old friends. The wind is gentle now, warm, no longer whispering secrets of the past but carrying songs of the present. Somewhere far below, a raven cries, its wings catching the dawn. You stand again at the edge of Mesa Verde, but this time, the silence feels different. Not empty. Not ancient. Alive. The story you've followed across centuries no longer belongs to those who vanished into history, it belongs to those who never left. Because the ancestral Puebloans did not disappear. The living descendants of those who once called these cliffs home still walk beneath the same stars, still sing the same songs, still plant the same corn. They are the continuation of this world. The descendants walk among us, the Hopi, the Zuni, the Acoma, the Taos, the Tewa, and others who still call this land sacred. Their footsteps fall in time with the old ones. Their songs are the same wind, carried forward. If you journey south from Mesa Verde, the landscape opens, wide mesas rolling toward the horizon, red earth giving way to the deep blues and ochres of New Mexico and Arizona. Villages rise from the rock-like echoes of the cliffs themselves, adobe walls, rounded kivas, ladders leaning against rooftops under the blazing sun. In these pueblos, life moves to the same rhythm it has for 1,000 years. Dawn prayers greet the rising sun. Fields of corn, beans, and squash stretch across dry valleys, their rows shaped by the same understanding of water and wind that once sustained the cliff dwellers. Children play in courtyards, their laughter chasing dust through the air. Elders sit in the shade, telling stories that begin not with long ago, but with when the world was new. Because for the Pueblo peoples, time is not a line but a circle, always turning, always returning. The ancestors are not behind them. They are within them. You sit with a Hopi elder one afternoon, the air warm and still, the mesas glowing like old copper. His hands are weathered, his eyes bright as obsidian. He points to the horizon, where the sun is beginning to dip. They are still there, he says quietly, nodding toward the north, toward Mesa Verde. We came from those cliffs. The spirits still live in those walls. When the wind moves through the canyons, it carries their breath. You listen. The air hums faintly with insects, with heat, with time. He continues, "We don't say they vanished. They changed homes. We still sing their songs. When we dance for the rain, when we plant corn, when we build our homes, we are speaking their language." It's the same story, still being told. And then he smiles. The land never forgets its people. It remembers us, even when we forget ourselves. To the Hopi and Zuni, the migration from Mesa Verde is not a mystery. It is a sacred chapter in their own emergent story. They believe the people were guided by spiritual messengers, the Katsanim, who led them to new lands when the balance of the old world began to fade. Each migration was a renewal, a continuation of the great journey of life. The kivas of today mirror those of Mesa Verde, round, subterranean, symbolic of the underworld from which humanity first emerged. When they enter to pray, they descend not only into earth but into memory. The same symbols remain, the sipapu, a small hole in the kiva floor representing the place of origin, the ladder reaching upward, bridging the worlds. Every ceremony, every song, every step in the sacred dances ties the present to the past like beads on a string. The ancestral Puebloans are not gone. They are spoken into being each time the drum beats, each time the dancers move in rhythm with the earth. In the Pueblos of Acoma and Taos, adobe homes rise in tiers, blending with the rock as if the cliffs themselves have decided to keep living. The walls breathe with heat by day and cool by night, their colors shifting with the sun. Inside, families gather around hearths, cooking with the same clay pots whose patterns echo those found in Mesa Verde. Hands still knead clay with care, mixing ash and sand, shaping vessels that are both art and ancestry. The designs painted on them, spirals, lightning bolts, feathers, have not changed much in 1,000 years. Each symbol still holds meaning: rain, life, protection, gratitude. You realize that every pot, every woven basket, every melody played on a cedar flute is a conversation across centuries, an answer whispered back to the ancestors. Among the Zuni, the cornmeal offering remains central, a gesture older than writing, older than the cliffs. Before a journey, a pinch is scattered to the wind. Before a meal, a bit is sprinkled on the ground. It is not superstition, it is acknowledgement. They say that every grain of corn carries the memory of the first seed, the one planted by the ancestors when the world was still young. To offer cornmeal is to remind the earth, we remember you, and you remember us. In this simple act, you see the whole philosophy of a people, that relationship is sacred, and gratitude is survival. You attend a ceremony, not as a tourist, but as a listener. The air is electric with anticipation, the smell of cedar smoke drifting across the plaza. Drums begin, slow and steady, like the heartbeat of the earth. Dancers emerge, their movements fluid, circular, mirroring the rhythm of rain and wind. Their faces are hidden behind masks painted with clouds and lightning. Their steps are deliberate, each one a prayer offered to the sky. The songs rise and fall like waves, ancient syllables flowing through the air, words that carry meanings deeper than translation. You feel it, that same pulse that once beat within the kivas of Mesa Verde, the same sound that echoed between cliff walls under starlight. The people have not forgotten who they are. They never stop speaking the language of balance. The connection runs deeper than tradition. It lives in the bones of the land itself. The Hopi still tend terrace fields, planting corn without irrigation, trusting instead in timing, patience, and prayer, the same practices that once sustained their ancestors on the dry mesas of the north. They say that when they plant with humility. The earth is alive, one farmer explains. She listens. You must speak kindly to her. He places a kernel in the soil, covers it gently, and stands in silence for a moment. That silence, you realize, is the same silence that fills the cliff dwellings, the same reverence, unchanged. In every seed sown, every breath of wind, every shadow cast across the mesas, the ancestral Puebloans live again. And yet the modern world presses in. Highways cut through the desert. Tourists with cameras wander through sacred lands, their voices too loud, their eyes too quick. The old balance is harder to keep. Still, the descendants endure. They adapt without forgetting. They teach their children to listen to the land, to know the old songs, to remember the path that began in the cliffs. Schools teach English and history, yes, but at home, the elders still speak the ancient languages. They still tell stories by firelight about Spider-Woman, about the twins, about how humans learn to live in balance with all things. And through those stories, the thread holds. The living and the ancestral remain bound, not by memory alone, but by daily life, by corn, by clay, by sky. You return once more to Mesa Verde, years later, this time not as an observer but as a visitor who has been taught how to listen. The park is quiet in the late afternoon. Tourists have gone, and the light slants low across the stone. In the distance, you see a small group of Pueblo elders standing near the edge of Cliff Palace. They speak softly among themselves, their words carried away by the wind. Then, one of them steps forward and scatters a handful of cornmeal into the canyon. The powder floats for a moment, glittering in the sunlight, then disappears into the shadows below. It is an offering, to the ancestors, to the land, to the endless circle of life. You realize you are witnessing a conversation across 1,000 years. The cliffs are listening. The wind is answering. The story has come full circle. You walk down to one of the dwellings, the stones cool beneath your fingers. You trace the lines of mortar, the edges of ancient doorways. Once, these walls echoed with voices. Now, they hold only the faint hum of the wind, but you know now that this silence isn't emptiness. It's continuation. Because somewhere, miles away, a Hopi child is learning a rain song. A Zuni potter is shaping clay with the same care as her ancestors. A Pueblo farmer is planting corn beneath the same sun that once shone here. The civilization never ended. It just changed shape. The people of Mesa Verde still live, not only in museums or stories, but in every sunrise over red rock, in every dance for rain, in every hand that shapes earth into beauty. As the sun sinks, painting the cliffs in copper and rose, you feel the truth settle into you like the warmth of the day's last light. The ancestral Puebloans are not gone. They are the wind that moves through the canyon, the rhythm of drums in distant pueblos, the laughter of children running through dust. They are the breath of this land, still inhaling, still exhaling, still singing. Their descendants carry the flame forward, quietly, faithfully, through centuries of change. And as night falls, you understand that this story, the story of endurance, of harmony, of memory, has no ending. It only flows, like water through stone, like wine through the cliffs, like prayer through time. You look out once more over Mesa Verde, now wrapped in twilight, and whisper what you have learned. Nothing here is lost. Nothing ever was. And as the stars rise, the same stars the ancestors watched, the same river of light across the sky, you know what comes next. The world grows still, listening. The cliffs gleam faintly under moonlight. The last warmth fades from the air. Night settles gently over the cliffs. The last light of the sun lingers for a moment on the stone, painting the walls in rose and gold before slipping away into blue. The air cools. The desert exhales. Above, the first stars appear, sharp, unwavering, eternal. You stand once more at the edge of the canyon, looking down at the ancient dwellings. They lie quiet beneath the great overhangs of sandstone, caught halfway between earth and sky. For a moment, it seems as though the world is holding its breath. And perhaps it is. Because this stillness, this vast, echoing calm, is not emptiness. It is memory at rest. The wind stirs softly, weaving through the rooms, through the empty plazas, through the kivas that open to the sky. It hums along the stone edges like a familiar melody, the same one that has played here for 1,000 years. Each gust feels like the turning of a page. If you listen long enough, you can almost hear the layers beneath the silence, the laughter of children, the low rhythm of grinding stones, the murmur of voices around a fire. These sounds are gone, and yet they are not. They are folded into the air, into the rock, into the pulse of the land. Mesa Verde is still breathing. It always was. You walk slowly down the trail toward the dwellings, the path lit only by moonlight. The air tastes of sage and stone, of distant rain that never quite reaches the ground. The shadows move like water, pooling and shifting around your feet. At the entrance to Cliff Palace you pause. The walls rise before you, terraces and towers gleaming faintly, their edges softened by time. From this angle, the whole city looks less like a ruin and more like a living organism, stone grown from stone, shaped by human hands but utterly at home in the earth. You step closer. Your hand touches the wall, cool and smooth. The sandstone yields slightly beneath your palm, as if remembering warmth. You close your eyes, and for a heartbeat, you feel another hand beneath yours, smaller, rougher, coated in dust. It's as if time itself has reached back to greet you. The silence here is not heavy, it's gentle. It presses lightly against the skin, the way a parent hushes a child. It asks you to listen, not with your ears, but with your bones. And when you do, you realize the quiet is full of presence, full of continuity. The people who built these homes are not gone. Their breath moves in the wind. Their songs ride the stars. Their footsteps are woven into the pathways that still wind through the cliffs. Everywhere you look, there is evidence of love, the kind that doesn't need words or monuments. A handprint on a wall. A grinding stone worn smooth by generations. A ladder resting exactly where it was left, still reaching upward toward the light. These are not relics. They are reminders. The past is not something we visit. It is something we stand inside of, whether we realize it or not. Above you, the Milky Way stretches across the sky, a silver river flowing from horizon to horizon. You think of the ancestral Puebloans watching the same stars, reading their patterns, aligning their kivas and doorways to the solstice sun. The stars have changed little since then. They shine with the same clarity, the same indifference, the same grace. The people who once danced beneath them are gone, and yet their dance continues, every night, written in light. The cosmos keeps no calendar. It only remembers motion. And in that eternal movement, nothing truly ends. You find yourself thinking of all who have walked this land, the ones who built, the ones who left, the ones who returned. The archaeologists with their notebooks. The descendants with their prayers. The visitors who come with curiosity and leave with reverence. Each of them adds another layer to the canyon's song. Mesa Verde is not a monument to the dead. It's a conversation between the living and the eternal. Even now, the land continues to teach the same lessons it once whispered to the ancestral Puebloans. How to listen, how to endure, how to live in balance with the world. The cliffs are old, yes, but not ancient in the way of things that have ended. They are ancient in the way of things that continue to become. You walk deeper into the ruins, your footsteps soft on the stone. The moonlight catches the edge of a kiva. You climb down carefully, feeling the ladder creak under your weight. Inside, the air is cool and close. The circular walls curve around you like an embrace. You stand in the center, where the fire once burned, and look up through the opening above, a perfect circle framing the stars. You imagine the people gathered here, their faces glowing in firelight, their songs rising into the dark. You can almost see the sparks spiraling upward, vanishing into the night like souls ascending. That fire may be gone, but its warmth remains. You can feel it in the stone beneath your feet, in the pulse of the air. The kiva is not empty. It is alive with memory, the memory of connection. There's a stillness that comes only after a story has been fully told, not the silence of ending, but the peace of understanding. You feel that stillness now, standing here where earth meets sky, where time folds in on itself. The people of Mesa Verde did not seek immortality. They sought balance, with wind, with water, with one another. And perhaps that is why they have endured, long after empires and kingdoms have turned to dust. Their legacy isn't carved into monuments of power. It's written in the harmony of stone and spirit. In every hand-shaped wall, in every prayer whispered to the rain, they left behind a truth that echoes still. That the measure of a civilization is not in how long it lasts, but in how deeply it listens to the world that sustains it. Outside, the wind has changed direction. It comes now from the east, cool and steady. The stars above are brighter, their light cutting cleanly through the dark. Somewhere far away, thunder rumbles, the kind that rolls low and slow, promising rain. You climb out of the kiva and stand beneath the open sky. The canyon stretches wide before you, vast and waiting. The walls glow faintly under the moon, soft as breath. The air hums with the sound of water, distant, imagined, remembered. And then you hear it, the first drop of rain hitting stone. It's faint, almost nothing. Then another. And another. Within minutes, the rain begins to fall, gentle, rhythmic, steady. It runs down the cliff walls, filling the old basins, tracing the same channels the ancestral Puebloans carved so long ago. It gathers in the shallow pools, reflecting the stars, blurring the line between heaven and earth. The land drinks deeply. The silence becomes song. You lift your face to the rain. The drops are cool, tasting faintly of dust and sky. They fall on your hands, your clothes, your hair, the same water that once sustained the people of these cliffs, the same cycle renewed again and again. And for a moment, everything, past, present, future, folds into one breath. You understand what they must have known, that nothing truly ends, that every loss is also return, that the world itself is a vast, breathing circle. The rain keeps falling. The canyon glows faintly with life. The dwellings shimmer, their walls slick with reflected light. The stones seem to exhale, as if relieved to be touched again by the sky. The silence of Mesa Verde is not broken. It is transformed. When morning comes, the air is washed clean. The cliffs gleam softly, their colors richer, their shadows deeper. The smell of wet sage rises like incense. You stand once more on the rim of the canyon. The world feels new again. The wind moves past you, cool and sure. It carries with it the voices of those who came before, not in words, but in feeling. And in that moment you realize, their story was never about disappearance or mystery. It was about endurance, about relationship, about the quiet miracle of life that persists, even in stone. They did not build to defy time. They built to belong to it. And in doing so, they became part of something that never ends. The sun climbs slowly, lighting the cliffs from within. The dwellings glow once more, alive in the morning light. Birds call from the canyon rim. The air hums with new beginnings. You turn to go, but not away. Because you understand now that leaving this place doesn't mean leaving the story. You carry it with you, in breath, in silence, in the patient rhythm of your own heartbeat. The people of Mesa Verde are no longer voices from the past. They are companions in the present, reminders of how to live, how to listen, how to belong to the earth again. You walk away slowly, the wind at your back, the cliffs fading into light. Behind you, the canyon exhales once more, not in farewell, but in blessing. And so, as the day begins anew, you whisper one final thought into the wind, knowing it will find its way down to the stones below. Thank you for the patience of the earth, for the endurance of memory, for the silence that holds more life than sound ever could. The story of Mesa Verde does not end here. It continues. In the rain that falls, in the corn that grows, in the songs that rise with the dawn, in the hearts of all who still walk beneath these cliffs and call this land home. And so, as the light expands across the mesa, the last words of this long, quiet journey settle like dust in the air, soft and sure. These stones do not keep secrets. They keep memory. And if you listen closely enough, The silence of Mesa Verde will tell you everything you need to know.